Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step into the year 1364 high in the Alps, where the road is white, the sky is low, and a mountain monastery waits behind walls of stone while a snowstorm gathers around it. You're not arriving for comfort exactly. This is not a spa retreat with heated floors and herbal tea served in perfect little cups. You probably won't survive this if your plan is to complain politely and hope medieval room service appears. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell us where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Maybe you are warm in bed, maybe rain is tapping your window, maybe snow is falling outside too, which is dramatic, but hopefully with better insulation. Now, dim the lights and let the cold road take you upward. You trudge through snow that reaches above your ankles, then your calves whenever the wind has pushed it into uneven banks. The path is not truly a road anymore, not in the neat modern sense. It is a pale suggestion between dark pines, a track pressed by mule hooves, pilgrims' boots, and the memory of better weather. Each step sinks with a soft crunch, followed by the wet drag of your foot pulling free. The Alps rise around you like sleeping giants under wool blankets of cloud. Their upper slopes are hidden now, swallowed by a grey sky that seems to sag lower each minute. Somewhere above, ridges and cliffs lean over the pass, but you see only shifting whiteness, black tree trunks, and the faint brown line of your guide's cloak ahead. The air tastes of iron, snow, and your own tired breath. You keep one hand tucked inside your cloak, trying to hold warmth against your chest. The other grips a staff polished smooth by older palm. It is not elegant. It is not heroic. It is extremely useful, which in the 14th century is often better than being elegant. Your boots are stiff with cold. Your wool hose itch where melting snow has crept inside them. Every few steps, the wind throws loose flakes sideways so they sting your cheek. Behind you, the valley has vanished, not faded, vanished. The track curves downward somewhere, back toward villages, fields, timber sheds, and the little chapel where you heard morning mass before climbing. But the storm has folded all of that away. You belong to the mountain now, and the mountain has very limited customer support. A common truth of this period rests quietly beneath your struggle. By 1364, monasteries across alpine routes often served as places of shelter, prayer, and practical aid for travellers crossing dangerous passes. They were not only spiritual houses, they were also lifelines in a landscape where weather could turn a journey into a burial in a single afternoon. You understand that now in your bones. The man ahead of you lifts his arm. At first you think he has seen a tree, or a rock, or some other shape in the snow that requires avoidance. Then you squint through the white air and notice something darker than the woods. A wall, a line too straight for nature, a roof shape, low and heavy, holding snow along its edge, then another roof behind it, then a tower, square and blunt, barely rising above the clustered buildings. The monastery, it does not glow, it does not open like heaven. It sits there like a stubborn thought, half buried in weather, built from stone that looks as cold as the mountain itself. Yet the sight loosens something inside your chest. Shelter does not need to be beautiful when your toes have stopped feeling loyal to the rest of your body. The bell tower appears and disappears as snow passes in veils. A small bell begins to sound, slow and dull in the wind. Not loud, not grand, just enough. A tired voice of bronze saying, "Here, here, here." You follow it. The last stretch is worse because hope makes each step feel longer. The track climbs between low stone boundary walls, their tops rounded by snow. Your guide leans into the slope. You do the same. Wind catches your cloak and snaps it against your legs. A mule somewhere behind you snorts, then slips, then recovers with a clatter of iron-shod hooves on hidden rock. At the outer gate, The world narrows. The monastery wall rises before you, pale grey and patched with frost. The gate itself is timber, dark from age and weather, reinforced with iron bands. A small covered entrance crouches beside it, where travellers can knock without being buried immediately. A thoughtful feature you appreciate with sudden religious intensity. Your guide pounds on the wood once, twice. The sound is swallowed by mud snow. For a moment, nothing happens. You stand with your breath steamed beneath your hood. Snow settles on your shoulders. It gathers in the folds of your cloak, in the seam of your sleeve, along the rim of your cap. You begin to imagine the monks inside warm and asleep, which is unfair, because monks are rarely allowed to be warm and asleep for long. Still, the thought arrives. Medieval tiredness does not improve your charity. Then a slot opens. A narrow face appears, candlelit and cautious. Words pass between your guide and the porter in a mixture of local speech and monastery Latin, enough for you to understand very little and worry very efficiently. The porter looks past him at the mule, the bundled travellers, your hunched shape, and the darkening road. He closes the slot. Wooden bars scrape. The gate opens inward. Warmth does not rush out. That would be too generous. Instead, you receive a breath of air that is slightly less cruel, smelling of smoke, damp wool, animals, old straw, and boiled something. It might be soup, it might be laundry. At this moment, both are miracles. You step inside. The courtyard is not calm, not yet. Snow spins within the walls as if disappointed it has been trapped there. A brother in a dark wool habit crosses with a lantern cupped close to his chest. Another pulls a hood tighter around his face while leading the mule toward a low building near the stables, somewhere under a covered walk. A door bangs, then thuds shut. The monastery is a small world under siege. You notice the buildings by fragments. A chapel wall with narrow windows, a guest range where smoke leaks from a roof vent, a storehouse door half blocked by drifted snow, a trough frozen at the edges, a stack of firewood under a lean-to, carefully covered with woven mats and weighed down by stones. The wood matters, everything matters here. Bread, salt, dry straw, lamp oil, shoe leather, silence, timing. One curious little belief clings to the place as naturally as frost on stone. In some Alpine communities, people told stories of bells calming storms, warning wanderers, or confusing evil things that moved in bad weather. Sensible, maybe not. Comforting, absolutely. And when you hear that small bell behind you, tapping through the snow, you do not feel like laughing at anyone's grandmother. A lay brother leads you across the courtyard. He is not smiling, but he's not unkind. His face is red from cold. Ice has gathered along the edge of his hood. He gestures toward a covered passage where packed snow has been swept aside with a twig broom. You follow, stepping carefully, listening to the hollow sound of your boots on stone. Historians still argue whether travellers at remote alpine monasteries usually experienced welcome as open-handed charity, strict religious duty, or a carefully controlled exchange of obligation and reputation. Perhaps tonight it is all three. You are received because Christian mercy requires it, because the house has long accepted this role, and because leaving you outside would make even the sternest abbot sleep poorly. The porter shuts the gate behind the last mule. The bar falls into place. That sound is heavy, final, and strangely tender. Outside, the road disappears completely. Inside, the storm continues to breathe against the walls. But now there is a wall, there is a gate. There is a lantern ahead of you, its flame bending in the draught like a small golden reed. You cross beneath the covered walk and reach the guest door. The lay brother lifts the latch. For one last instant, you turn your head toward the courtyard. Snow drifts through the dimness. The bell tower stands above everything, blunt and patient. The mountains are no longer visible, but you feel them pressing close, vast and cold, holding the monastery in their white hands. Then the door opens. A darker warmth waits within. You lower your head and step inside, carrying the storm on your cloak. The door closes behind you, and the mountain becomes a sound instead of a place. It presses at the shutters. It worries the roof. It drags fingers of wind along the stone joints as if trying to remember where the cracks are hidden. Inside the guest hall, the storm loses its teeth a little, but not its voice. It hums in the walls. It whistles under the door. It bows down the smoke hole and makes the fire answer in restless orange tongues. You stand just within the threshold, dripping quietly. Snow slides from your cloak in soft clumps. It lands on the stone floor and begins to melt into dark patches around your boots. Nobody gasps. Nobody fusses. This is not a place where wet travellers are rare. The monks have seen worse arrive at their gate merchants with frostbitten fingers, pilgrims who underestimated a pass, muleteers swearing gently at animals, and the occasional nobleman discovering that titles do not keep out weather. Very educational for the nobleman, probably. The guest hall is long, low and dim. A fire burns in a raised hearth near the centre, not large enough to conquer the room, only large enough to negotiate with it. Smoke curls upward, searching for the vent above. Some of it escapes properly. Some of it decides to stay and season everyone's lungs. Your eyes water almost at once, and the scent settles around you: wood smoke, damp wool, old rushes, tallow, sour boots, and the faint sweetness of stored hay from somewhere beyond the wall. The warmth is real, but thin. It touches your face first, then your hands, then much later. Your feet consider believing in it. A lay brother gestures for you to remove your outer cloak. The wool is heavy with snowmelt, and when you unclasp it, your shoulders rise with sudden relief. He takes it without ceremony and hangs it on a peg near several other garments that look like tired animals. Steam lifts from them in ghostly wisps. You keep your tunic on. You keep your cap on until a monk gives you a look that suggests the Almighty may forgive many things, but not damp headwear indoors during hospitality. You remove it. Your hair is flattened and cold. A little melted snow runs down your neck, which is exactly the sort of intimate betrayal winter enjoys. The hall holds other travellers. A merchant sits near the wall with his boots unlaced, rubbing one foot through a wool stocking. Beside him, a younger man guards a leather pack as if every saint in heaven is personally interested in stealing it. Two pilgrims sit close together, their badges dull in the firelight. One has a scallop shell sewn to his hat, though whether he has truly been to Santiago or simply wishes everyone to think so is between him, God, and his hatmaker. At the far end, a monk writes something on a wax tablet. Names, perhaps, arrivals, numbers of guests, animals stabled, food owed by custom or charity. Medieval hospitality may be holy, but it's not always vague. Someone has to count the loaves. A plain wooden bench is offered to you. You sit. Your knees notice immediately. The bench has no back. The stone beneath your feet holds the day's cold like a grudge. Your hands hover toward the hearth, palms open. The heat prickles your skin painfully, then pleasantly, then painfully again as feeling returns. You breathe out slowly. A widely known feature of medieval Benedictine and Augustinian houses is their structured hospitality. Monasteries often kept guest spaces separate from the cloistered life of the monks, so travellers could be sheltered without turning the whole community into a roadside inn with chanting. That separation matters here. You are inside the monastery, but not truly within its private heart. You are welcomed, watched, warmed, and gently contained. The lay brother brings a wooden cup. The drink inside is warm, cloudy, and slightly sour. Thin ale, perhaps, or a weak small beer. Safer than questionable water and far less glamorous than modern fantasy taverns imply. You sip, tastes of grain, smoke, and survival. It is wonderful. A bowl follows, not yet supper, only something to keep you from collapsing with dramatic inconvenience. A little broth, a scrap of bread, maybe onion, maybe turnip. The spoon is wooden and worn smooth by many hands. You do not ask how many. 14th century hygiene is best approached like a dark room carefully. With lowered expectations, you glance around the walls. They are thick, uneven, built from local stone with lime mortar pressed deep between blocks. The surfaces are not polished. They are not decorative except where a simple cross has been carved above a doorway. Shadows gather in every corner. Above, blackened beams carry the roof, and from them hang bundles of drying herbs, spare rope, and something that might be a strip of cured meat or might be best admired from a distance. A small lamp burns near an image of the Virgin, its flame trembling inside a dish of oil. Wax is too valuable to waste everywhere. Tallow candles smell stronger. Oil lamps smoke, and daylight is presently unavailable because the sky has turned into a white wall, so the hall lives in layers of light, firelight, lamp glow, snow brightness pressing faintly through shutters, and darkness patiently waiting between them. One odd little custom from mountain regions whispers around the edges of the room. In some places, people believed that certain blessed objects, bells, candles, crumbs of holy bread, or scraps from a saint's shrine, could protect a building from storm or lightning. It sounds strange until you're sitting under a timber roof while the Alps shake snow against it. Then even a blessed crumb begins to seem like a reasonable insurance policy. A monk approaches you. He is older than the brother who led you in, with a narrow face, careful eyes, hands tucked into his sleeves. His habit is dark wool, belted simply. Snow has melted along the hem. He asks your name, your origin, your destination, and whether anyone has been left behind on the road. That last question changes the room. Not loudly, but the air tightens. You answer as best you can. Your party is inside. Your guide saw no one after the lower bend. The merchant looks up from his foot. One pilgrim crosses himself. The monk listens without moving much. His face does not reveal relief quickly. In a place like this, relief must be earned by daylight. Researchers have long debated whether remote monastic shelters were primarily religious refuges, economic nodes, or political markers of control along mountain routes. Sitting here, wrapped in smoke and thawing wool, you suspect the answer is not tidy. This hall is prayer made practical. It is logistics with a crucifix. It's mercy with a ledger near the fire. Another gust hits the building. The shutters rattle. Everyone pauses, even the monk. Snow hisses against wood. Somewhere outside, a door slams once, then someone shouts. Then the shout is lost. The monk's eyes move toward the sound. The lay brother near the cloaks reaches for his hood again, but no alarm follows. The room resumes, slowly. You drink from your cup. The warmth of it travels down into your chest. Your wet sleeves cling less harshly to your wrists. A dog you had not noticed lifts its head from beneath a bench, judges you with monastic seriousness, and lowers it again. Even the dog seems bound by rules. You begin to understand the monastery not as comfort, but as resistance. Every beam resists snow, every stored loaf resists hunger, every closed door resists the wind, every prayer, perhaps, resists fear. The building does not defeat the mountain, it endures beside it, stone by stone, winter by winter, traveller by traveller. The older monk gives a small nod. You may remain, not forever, not freely, not as though this is your house, but tonight. The gate has closed with you on the living side of it. The lay brother points toward the hearth, then toward the benches, then lifts two fingers and lowers them together in a gesture that means rest, wait, be quiet, or possibly stop dripping on everything. You choose all four. You shift closer to the fire. Here, your boots steam. The storm presses at the walls, patient and immense. While the thin warmth of the guest hall gathers around you like a borrowed cloak, you remain near the hearth while the evening settles more firmly around the monastery. Outside, the snowstorm continues its patient assault on the mountainside. Inside, a different force governs the hours. It is quieter, less dramatic, much harder to argue with. A bell rings. The sound reaches the guest hall through layers of stone and timber. It is not loud, it does not need to be. Everyone hears it anyway. The merchant lowers his cup. One pilgrim lifts his head. The old monk near the doorway pauses in mid-step. The bell is not merely marking time, it is commanding it. You quickly discover that life inside the monastery is arranged around rhythms far older than any traveller. Your arrival, your cold feet, your plans for tomorrow, even the storm itself must fit into a schedule that has governed generations of monks before you appeared at the gate. The old monk notices your curiosity. Perhaps he has seen it many times before. He settles briefly onto a bench near the fire and explains in measured words that the brothers follow a cycle of prayers throughout the day and night. The hours divide life into sacred portions. Work has its place, sleep has its place, silence has its place, even hunger has its appointed moment. One of the most familiar realities of medieval monastic life is this structure of daily prayer. In many monasteries, the divine office organised the day into a series of services stretching from before dawn until after dark. Bells regulated the community as reliably as clocks would regulate later centuries. You glance toward the shuttered windows. The idea of waking before dawn seems unpleasant enough. The idea of waking before dawn during an alpine snowstorm feels like a personal attack, yet nobody here appears surprised by it. The brothers move through their tasks with the calm confidence of people who have repeated the same routines thousands of times. A younger monk crosses the hall carrying an armful of firewood. Another brings folded blankets. A third checks the shutters, pressing against them to test the latches before moving on. Nothing is hurried, nothing is wasted. You begin to notice how little noise they make. Not silence exactly, more like careful sound. Boots scrape softly. Doors close gently. Voices remain low. Even laughter, when it appears, seems to arrive with permission. The old monk eventually rises. Before leaving, he offers a final piece of guidance. Guests are welcome. Guests are expected to behave. The second rule appears slightly more important than the first. You assure him that you possess excellent manners. Whether this is true remains uncertain, but he nods anyway and departs. The fire crackles. A gust rattles the shutters. The hall settles. For a while you simply sit and listen. The storm outside, the breathing of travellers, the occasional creak of beams overhead, the distant ringing of another bell somewhere deeper within the monastery. The building feels alive, not alive in a haunted sense, alive in the way ships feel alive at sea. Every beam carries strain, every wall bears weight, every room serves a purpose. The monastery breathes through chimneys, corridors, kitchens, storerooms, chapels, and dormitories. A curious little alpine tradition comes to mind as you watch snow gather against the window cracks. In some mountain communities, people believed storms could carry strange sounds from distant valleys. Travellers reported hearing bells, voices, or songs where none should exist. Modern explanations usually point toward wind and acoustics bouncing through mountainous terrain. Medieval listeners were often less certain. Honestly, after spending an hour in this weather, you can understand why. The wind already sounds capable of almost anything. As darkness deepens, more lamps are lit. Their glow softens the hall. Shadows shift along the stone walls. The merchant finally begins talking, not loudly. Merchants rarely become wealthy by announcing everything to strangers. Still, he shares enough. He had intended to cross the pass 2 days earlier. Snow delayed him, then ice delayed him. Then a mule decided to develop strong opinions about movement. The mule apparently won. The younger travellers smile. The dog beneath the bench opens one eye briefly. You find yourself smiling too. There is comfort in ordinary complaints. Storms may surround the monastery, mountains may loom beyond sight, yet people remain remarkably consistent. Give humans enough centuries, and they will still grumble about travel delays. The conversation drifts, road conditions, prices. Rumours from distant towns, news of harvests, news of disputes, and news of marriages. The strange thing about medieval life is that information travels slowly but never completely stops. Roads carry stories as surely as they carry goods. A topic arises concerning wolves that immediately captures attention. Everyone seems to have a wolf story. Someone knows a shepherd who saw 6 together. Someone else claims 12. A pilgrim insists he heard them outside a chapel last winter. The merchant raises an eyebrow. The number shrinks noticeably after that. Scholars continue to discuss how common dangerous wolf encounters truly were in medieval Europe. Stories certainly existed in abundance. Actual attacks appear much rarer than folklore sometimes suggests. Yet during harsh winters, when snow deepened and prey became scarce, fear of wolves remained very real. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between the stories and the skepticism. The storm gives another howl outside. Several people glance toward the walls, just in case. Eventually the bell rings again. This time the reaction is immediate. The monks who have been moving through the hall begin leaving toward the inner buildings. One traveller whispers a question. The answer comes softly. Prayer. You watch them go. Dark habits. Lantern glow. Steady footsteps disappearing down a corridor. The sight leaves an impression. These men have chosen this life. Year after year, winter after winter, while merchants cross mountains and pilgrims wander roads, the monks remain, not trapped, rooted. There is a difference. You wonder briefly whether you could live such a life. The answer arrives almost immediately. Probably not. You enjoy sleeping far too much, and yet part of you admires it, the certainty, the structure. The knowledge that tomorrow will begin with the same bells, the same prayers, the same tasks. Outside, the mountain changes constantly. Inside, the monastery answers change with routine. The fire burns lower. A lay brother adds another log. The sparks swirl upward. The room brightens again. You realize that your body has finally begun to thaw completely. The ache in your hands has faded. Your shoulders no longer feel locked in place. Even your boots have started drying beside the hearth. Warmth returns cautiously, like a cat deciding whether it trusts you. The dog beneath the bench seems to approve of the comparison. It rises, circles twice, and settles again with a heavy sigh. The sound somehow makes the hall feel even safer. The storm remains outside. The gate remains barred. The walls remain strong. For the first time since climbing through the snow, you allow yourself to believe that you may actually spend the night under a roof rather than beneath a drift. That realization brings a quiet wave of relief. The bells continue somewhere beyond sight. The monastery follows its ancient rhythm, and little by little, you find yourself moving to that rhythm as well. The bell fades, and the hall seems to exhale. Not fully. A monastery never fully relaxes, even at rest. It is counting hours, storing heat, saving bread, and listening for the next footstep in the snow. Yet after the brothers pass toward prayer, the guest hall loosens into the softer disorder of travellers waiting for supper. You remain near the hearth, watching steam rise from your boots. It curls upward in faint threads, carrying the smell of wet leather, road dirt, and the honest tragedy of feet that have crossed too much mountain. Beside you, the merchant stretches his toes toward the fire and sighs as though he has reached paradise. Medieval paradise, apparently, includes smoke in the eyes and a bench designed by someone with a personal dislike of backs. A lay brother returns from the kitchen passage with a large wooden bowl balanced against his hip. Another follows with bread wrapped in cloth. Their steps are steady, but the room notices them instantly. Conversation thins, heads turn. Hunger is one of the oldest bells in the world, and everyone hears it clearly. The food is not grand. It is not meant to be. A thick pottage is ladled into bowls, pale brown and greenish in the firelight. Barley, peas, perhaps leeks, a few shredded herbs, and something earthy that might be turnip or cabbage. The smell is humble, warm, and deeply persuasive. You take the bowl in both hands. Heat presses through the wood into your fingers. For a moment, that is enough. Just heat, just wait. Just the promise that your stomach will stop behaving like an abandoned chapel. Bread follows, dense, dark, and slightly sour, with a crust hard enough to remind you that teeth are a privilege, not a guarantee. A small piece of cheese is shared among those closest to the fire. It is sharp, crumbly, and precious. You receive a portion no larger than 2 fingertips, and you handle it with the respect usually reserved for relics. Records from medieval monastic houses show that food often reflected both religious discipline and local survival. In mountain regions, grains, legumes, cheese, stored vegetables, dried fruit, and salted goods mattered far more than fresh abundance. The meal before you is simple because the season is hard, the road is closed, and nobody has invented supermarkets, which was frankly inconsiderate of history. You dip bread into the pottage. It softens slowly. The first mouthful is hot enough to make you pause. Then it settles. Warmth spreads through you in a slow, practical wave. Not luxury, not pleasure exactly. Something older. The body saying yes. This will do. Round the hall, the same quiet ritual unfolds. The pilgrims eat with heads bowed. The merchant tears bread with one hand while guarding his pack with the other. The younger man beside him eats too fast, burns his tongue, and tries to pretend he is not. Nobody comments, which is kind, because everyone saw it. A traveller near the far wall murmurs thanks after each bite. The dog beneath the bench receives nothing until a lay brother looks away for the length of one suspiciously well-timed prayer. A crumb falls, the dog accepts it with holy efficiency. You spoon up more pottage. The taste grows better as hunger retreats. Smoke from the hearth mingles with the steam from the bowls. The lamps along the wall tremble when wind pushes under the door. Outside, the storm still scours the courtyard. Inside, supper gathers people into a temporary little country of warmth and chewing. A curious detail from medieval food culture is that spices could carry meanings beyond flavour. In wealthy houses, imported spices displayed status, trade connections, and medical beliefs. Here, high in the Alps, your bowl contains no exotic display, no cinnamon swagger, no saffron showing off, but the herbs floating in the broth still matter. They are local knowledge, gathered in summer, dried carefully, and used when winter narrows the world. One pilgrim asks what herb has been added. The lay brother answers with a word you do not know. The old monk, returning from the passage, translates into a more familiar tongue. Mountain sorrow, perhaps, or a bitter green used for digestion. He says it helps warm the stomach. The merchant nods as though he has always believed in the spiritual importance of digestion. You do not argue. Your own stomach feels extremely devout. The old monk sits at the edge of the firelight, not eating with the guests, but watching the hall with the steady attention of someone responsible for both charity and order. He speaks briefly with the lay brother. Their words are low. You catch fragments about stores, the outer door, the mule, the path, the hour. Supper is not separate from survival. Every bowl served tonight is a bowl missing from tomorrow's stores. Every traveller welcomed must be fed if the storm lasts. That is not a reason to refuse help. It is a reason to count carefully. Experts continue to examine how far medieval hospitality stretched in practice when resources were strained. Religious ideals praised generosity to strangers. Yet surviving records also show rules, limits, rankings, and expectations. A poor pilgrim, a wealthy merchant, a noble messenger, and a half-frozen unknown traveller might all be received, but not always in the same way, and not always with equal comfort. You glance at your bowl, you're grateful not to be testing the limits too sharply. At least not yet. The old monk asks whether you carry letters. You do. Not royal business. Nothing dramatic enough to attract assassins, thank goodness. Just sealed messages entrusted to your party by a prior house in the valley. Monasteries, towns, bishops, merchants, and families all rely on moving words through difficult places. A letter can cross a mountain more quietly than an army, though tonight even a letter may need to wait for the snow to reconsider its attitude. The monk takes the packet only after asking permission. His fingers are dry, narrow, and careful. He studies the seals near the lamp, then nods. They will be kept safe until morning, or until the road opens. In medieval travel, those two things are not always related. More bread is passed, not much, enough. The merchant produces a small pouch of salt and, after a moment of visible internal conflict, offers a pinch to the pilgrims. This act changes his social standing immediately. Salt is useful, valuable, and not handed around casually by people who want to remain wealthy. The pilgrims thank him. He shrugs, pretending indifference, but you notice he looks pleased. There is a softness after shared food, not trust, that would be too quick, but recognition. You have all entered the gate under the same snow. You all listen to the same wind. You all hold bowls that warm your hands. For tonight, that is almost community. The old monk tells the lay brother to bring more ale, weak and warm. The cups move slowly through the hall. You drink. The flavour is grainy, sour, and faintly smoky. It is not good in any modern sense. It's very good in the sense that it's here. Conversation drifts again. Someone asks how long the storm may last. No one knows. That is the answer nobody likes and everyone expected. The old monk says the mountains decide. The merchant mutters that the mountains are poor planners. A pilgrim smiles into his bowl. Even the old monk's mouth almost moves. Almost. Outside, a hard gust strikes the building and snow sprays against the shutters like thrown sand. The lamps flicker. The dog lifts its head. The younger traveller stops eating. The hall waits. The walls hold. The fire steadies. Spoons resume. You take another piece of bread and press it into the last of your pottage, scraping the bowl clean because waste feels almost rude in a place like this. Your body grows heavier now, not from fear, but from food and warmth and the long climb, finally collecting its debt. The lay brother gathers empty bowls. When he reaches you, you hand yours back with both hands and a quiet thanks. He nods once. His face gives away nothing, but he leaves an extra crust beside you on the bench. A tiny mercy. You break it slowly. The storm continues beyond the walls, but supper has changed the night. You're still trapped. The road is still gone. The mountains still lean close in the dark. Yet now there is bread inside you. There is warmth in your hands. There is a place for your tired body to wait. And as the lamps burn lower and the hall settles into the smoky hush after eating, you feel the monastery drawing you deeper into its careful ancient order. After supper, the guest hall changes again, not quickly. Nothing here changes quickly unless it is weather or disaster, and both are poor examples to follow. The room settles in layers, as if each person is being gently folded into the night. Bowls vanish toward the kitchen passage. Cups are collected. The last crusts are tucked away, eaten, or offered to the dog with expressions of innocent surprise. The fire burns lower now, not dying, but thinking about it. A lay brother adds a split log with the care of someone who knows exactly how much wood remains outside under the lean-to. The log catches slowly, first smoking, then glowing along one edge, then opening into flame with a soft crack. Sparks rise and vanish into the dark throat above the hearth. You sit with your hands resting in your lap, full enough to feel heavy, tired enough to stop pretending you are alert. The climb has left itself in your body. Your calves ache. Your shoulders remember the pack. Your skin still holds the cold where snow pressed through wool. Yet now, after pottage and weak ale, your exhaustion becomes less sharp. It spreads through you like warmth through damp cloth. A monk appears at the door and speaks quietly to the lay brother. The guest dormitory is ready. Ready is a generous word. You learn this very soon. You rise with the others and follow the lantern out of the hall. The corridor beyond is colder at once. Stone gives back the night without apology. Your breath appears faintly before your face. The flame in the lantern bends and straightens with each draught, throwing thin gold across the walls. The passage smells of smoke, wax, damp mortar, and old wool. Your boots scrape. Someone coughs. A pilgrim whispers a prayer, perhaps out of gratitude, perhaps because the corridor has all the cheer of a cellar that has studied theology. The lay brother leads you up a short stair and through a low doorway. You duck instinctively, which is wise, because medieval architecture often assumes people are either shorter, more humble, or less attached to their foreheads. The guest sleeping room lies beneath the rafters. It is long and narrow, with a sloping roof overhead and small shuttered openings along one wall. The shutters are closed, but not perfectly. Nothing is perfect here except the cold, which performs brilliantly. Straw pallets line the floor, each covered with a rough wool blanket. A few wooden pegs hold cloaks. A single lamp burns near the entrance. Its light barely reaches the far corner. This is your bed, not yours in the deep sense. Yours for tonight. If the storm permits the roof to remain where it is, you look at the straw pallet assigned to you. It is not large, it is not stuffed. It has a depression in the middle where many previous bodies have negotiated with discomfort. Still, it is dry. That one fact gives it an almost royal dignity. An established part of medieval hospitality was the use of shared sleeping spaces, especially for ordinary travellers. Privacy, as modern people cherish it, was not the default expectation. Warmth and shelter mattered more than personal space. In winter, bodies in one room could even be useful, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. You sit on the pallet, the straw compresses with a dry rustle, a faint smell rises, clean enough, though touched with dust, old hay and the memory of animals. The blanket is coarse, thick and scratchy. It feels like it was woven by someone who believed softness encouraged moral weakness. You remove your boots slowly. This is a serious operation. The leather has stiffened near the edges. Your fingers work at the ties. When the first boot comes free, your foot feels both relieved and insulted. Steam no longer rises from it, which seems like progress. Your wool hose are damp at the toes. You peel them away just enough to rub warmth back into your skin. Across the room, the merchant arranges his pack as a pillow, and then places one arm over it. This is less sleep posture than defensive architecture. The pilgrims share a corner near the wall. The younger traveller shakes straw from his blanket and immediately regrets doing so, because it releases more dust than comfort. The lay brother passes through the room once more. He checks the shutters. He points toward a covered basin near the door, then to a chamber pot behind a hanging cloth. The gesture is discreet, but the reality is not. Medieval nights are full of practical arrangements that modern bedtime stories often forget. People must sleep. Yes, people must also manage bodies that continue making requests in the dark. One curious belief from the period concerns sleep itself. Many medieval people did not always think of sleep as one long, uninterrupted block. Evidence from later records and scattered earlier hints suggests that segmented sleep, waking in the night before returning to rest, may have been common in a monastery, with bells calling prayer before dawn. Sleep is less a private island and more a bridge between duties. You wonder how many times you will wake. The answer, as the wind hits the roof, is probably many. The lay brother lowers the lamp flame until the room dims further. Before leaving, he says that guests should remain quiet after the bell. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The monastery has taught even the shutters to listen. Then he closes the door. The room becomes a cave of breathing. You lie down carefully. The straw complains under your shoulder. The blanket lands heavily over you. It scratches your chin. You pull it closer anyway. Your body searches for comfort and finds something adjacent to it. There is a beam above you, dark and uneven. Beyond it, the roof slopes into shadow. The storm is louder here. In the hall, stone swallowed part of its voice. Beneath the rafters, you hear it testing everything. Snow brushes along the roof in waves. Wind finds the gaps near the shutters and threads through them with a thin whistle. Once, something outside thumps against the wall. A loose shutter, a branch, a demon with poor manners. Nobody gets up to check, which suggests either confidence or collective denial. The historical record leaves room for discussion about how warm medieval monastic guest rooms actually were in winter. Some houses had better resources, better fireplaces, or better insulation than others. In remote mountain settings, warmth depended on architecture, fuel supplies, altitude, weather, and status. Your own evidence tonight is simple. Your nose is cold, your feet are negotiating, and the blanket is doing its humble best. You turn onto your side, the straw shifts. Someone nearby mutters in sleep already, which feels unfairly efficient. The merchant coughs twice. The dog from the hall is not here, which is disappointing. A dog would improve the atmosphere and possibly the temperature. Instead, you share the room with tired strangers and the faint smell of damp clothing hung near the door. Yet there is comfort in that too. You're not alone under the storm. Breath by breath, the room gathers human warmth. Not much, enough to soften the edge of the cold. The pilgrims whisper once, then fall quiet. The younger traveller pulls his blanket over his head. The merchant's pack creaks as he adjusts his grip. You stare into darkness. Your mind continues walking for a while. It returns to the road, the gate, the bell, the hot pottage, the monk's careful eyes. It returns to the moment the bar fell into place behind you. That sound seems to echo now inside your chest. Closed out, closed in, saved. Perhaps for one night. The monastery does not promise ease. It promises order. The palate is hard. Oh, the blanket scratches. The air bites your face somewhere in the roof. The wind keeps asking questions no one intends to answer. But beneath the rafters, with straw under your bones and wool over your shoulders, you feel the first true pull of sleep. Not deep, not yet. A thin sleep. A mountain sleep. The kind that listens. The kind that keeps one ear open for bells, weather, and the small sounds of people enduring the same long night beside you. Sleep comes to you in pieces, a little warmth, a little darkness, a little drifting away, then the wind pulls you back. It slips along the shutters with a thin, needling sound, then grows sudden and deep, pushing hard against the roof until the rafters answer with a low wooden groan. You open your eyes to blackness. For a moment, you do not remember where you are. The ceiling above you is not your ceiling. The smell is not your familiar night smell. Straw presses against your hip. Wool scratches your jaw. Somewhere close by, a man breathes through a blocked nose with heroic commitment. Then memory returns. The mountain road, the gate, the hall, the pottage, or the guest room beneath the rafters. You are inside the monastery. The storm has not accepted this. Snow scrapes across the roof like a giant hand smoothing cloth. The shutters tremble in their frames. Fine powder hisses through some crack near the wall. Too little to become a drift. Too much to ignore. It lands on the floor with a dry whisper. The younger traveller near the door lifts his head. sees nothing useful, and lowers it again. You pull the blanket closer. It does not become softer. You appreciate it anyway. In a building like this, winter has many entrances. It does not need an open door. It arrives through keyholes, smoke vents, window seams, floor cracks, roof joints, damp clothing, cold stone, and the tired bones of anyone who has spent the day outside. The monastery resists it, but resistance is not victory. It's more like a very long argument conducted in drafts. A well-attested feature of medieval stone buildings is that thickness did not automatically mean warmth. Stone could protect wonderfully against wind, fire, and attack, but it also held cold with impressive loyalty. Without modern insulation, glass windows, sealed doors, and constant heating, indoor winter comfort remained limited, even in respected religious houses. You are learning this in the traditional way, which is through your nose. Your nose is freezing. This seems spiritually unnecessary. Across the room, the merchant mutters and shifts. His pack creaks under his arm. The pilgrims remain still. Two dark shapes under wool. The lamp near the door has been put out completely, leaving only a faint greyness at the shutter cracks whenever snowlight gathers outside. Another gust strikes. This one is different. It does not merely push, it punches. The whole guest room seems to tighten. A shutter bangs once, so loud enough to wake everyone. Someone curses under his breath, then immediately remembers the location and whispers an apology to God, the monks, and possibly the shutter. The door opens. A slice of lantern light enters the room. The lay brother stands there, hood pulled up, face shadowed, one hand around the lamp, the other holding a wooden mallet. Behind him, colder air spills in from the corridor. He gestures for quiet, though the storm is currently making most gestures symbolic. He crosses to the loose shutter. You watch from your pallet, half-wrapped and fully interested in someone else fixing the problem. He presses his shoulder against the wood, tests the latch, then drives a small wedge into place with the mallet. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike is measured. No wasted force, no drama, just maintenance in the dark while strangers stare at him from straw beds. There is something deeply monastic about it. Prayer by day, wedges by night. He moves to the next shutter, checks it, then pauses near the corner where snow has sifted in. He crouches, touches the floor, studies the crack, and stuffs a twist of cloth into the gap. The wind immediately tries to steal it. He pushes it deeper with 2 fingers and gives the wall a look that suggests disappointment. An unusual belief sometimes found in medieval weather lore was that certain storms had intention, not weather as pressure and moisture, but weather as mood, punishment, warning, or spiritual trial. You do not need to believe the storm is alive to understand why people described it that way. At 2 a.m, when the roof groans and snow enters through a wall that was perfectly respectable an hour ago, intention begins to feel plausible. The lay brother turns to leave. Before he reaches the door, another monk appears behind him in the corridor. Older, narrower, wrapped in a cloak over his habit. They speak in low voices. You catch only fragments. The lower door, the stable roof, the north wall. More snow before dawn. The older monk glances into the room, counting bodies perhaps, or measuring fear. His eyes pass over you, not coldly, not warmly, simply noting that you are present and alive. Then both men withdraw. The door closes. Darkness returns. But now you're awake, completely awake. This is deeply inconvenient. Your body is exhausted, yet your mind has decided to become a clerk of disaster, listing every possible problem in careful order. What if the roof leaks? What if the gate is buried? What if the stables collapse? What if someone is still out on the road? What if the fire in the hall dies? What if the monastery runs out of bread? What if the dog is warmer than you and knows it? That last thought seems likely. You turn onto your back. The straw rustles far too loudly. The merchant whispers, "Are you awake?" Nobody answers. This is wise. To admit wakefulness is to invite conversation, and conversation is the enemy of sleep. He sighs and turns over. For a while, the storm fills every space. It rises and lowers in waves. Sometimes it roars high above, among roof lines and the tower. Sometimes it drops low and skims the courtyard, sending snow against doors with a soft, sandy rush. At intervals, you hear faint movement below footsteps, a latch, the muffled thud of wood being shifted, perhaps brothers securing the outer buildings. The question remains unsettled among specialists how often monastic communities in severe climates had to interrupt their formal routines for emergency labour. Rules described prayer, reading, and work, but real weather demanded flexibility. A mountain house might follow sacred hours faithfully, then spend half the night saving a roof, clearing a path, or keeping animals alive. The rule gave shape to life. Snow negotiated exceptions. You listen for bells. None yet, only wind. Your thoughts wander toward the monks in their cells, if they have private cells at all, or in their dormitory, sleeping in habits, ready to rise when called. You imagine them used to this cold, then you correct yourself. People can be accustomed to hardship without enjoying it. A monk may accept winter discipline and still dislike a draft down the neck. Holiness is not the same thing as being immune to weather. A soft sound comes from near the far wall. One of the pilgrims is praying. The words are almost silent, no more than wreath shaped into devotion. You cannot make out the prayer, but the rhythm is soothing. It travels under the wind like a thread under cloth. The other pilgrim joins briefly, then both fall quiet. You close your eyes. The storm continues. But something has changed. Perhaps it is the repaired shutter, perhaps the whispered prayer, perhaps simple tiredness returning with official paperwork. Your fear loosens a little. You remember the bar falling across the gate. You remember the hot bowl in your hands. You remember the lay brother moving through darkness with his mallet. Not heroic, not grand, just useful. Sometimes safety is not silence. Sometimes safety is hearing someone awake in the building, doing what needs to be done. The wind pushes again. The wall holds. You breathe in smoke, straw, wool, cold stone, and the faint human warmth of the room. The mountain remains outside, still arguing, still pressing, or still certain of itself. But inside, the monastery answers with wedges, cloth, bells yet to ring, and tired people who refuse to surrender the night. Your eyes grow heavy. The storm finds cracks. The monastery finds them too. And somewhere between those two patient forces, you drift back towards sleep. The bell wakes you before the storm does. At first, you are not entirely sure it is real. The sound arrives from somewhere deep within the monastery, soft and distant beneath layers of sleep. One note, then another, slow, patient, uninterested in negotiation. You keep your eyes closed. Perhaps if you remain very still, the bell will assume you're a part of the furniture. The bell disagrees. Its steady voice continues through the darkness. Around you, the guest dormitory begins to stir. Blankets rustle. Someone groans quietly. A traveller coughs into his sleeve. The merchant beside the wall mutters something that sounds suspiciously like a complaint directed at both religion and the hour of the morning. You sympathise. Deeply. The room is cold enough that leaving the blanket feels like a strategic error. Yet curiosity eventually wins. You open your eyes. Darkness still fills most of the dormitory. Only a faint greyness touches the edges of the shutters. Outside, night remains firmly in control. Snow whispers against the roof. Wind prowls along the walls. The storm has not gone anywhere. The bell rings again. This time you hear movement beyond the door. Footsteps, measured, familiar. The monastery is waking, or perhaps it never truly slept. You sit up slowly. The straw mattress crackles beneath you. Cold air slips immediately under the blanket and attacks your knees. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and regret every life decision that led to standing upright. Across the room, The pilgrims are already awake. One is lacing his boots, the other quietly traces a sign of the cross. The merchant remains horizontal for several moments longer, apparently exploring alternative theological approaches to early mornings. Eventually he loses the argument. The door opens. A lay brother enters carrying a lantern. Its glow spills across the room in soft gold. Dust drifts through the light. Shadows stretch along the rafters overhead. He speaks only a few words. Guests may attend the night office if they wish. No obligation, no pressure, just an invitation. The pilgrims rise immediately. You hesitate. Warm blanket. Cold corridor. Warm blanket. Cold corridor. History is full of difficult choices. The pilgrims leave. The merchant stays. You look at the door, then at the darkness beyond, then at the door again. A few moments later, curiosity wins for the second time tonight. You pull on your boots, not because you're particularly pious, mostly because you have travelled all the way into a 14th century alpine monastery during a snowstorm, and it seems wasteful to sleep through the interesting parts. The corridor outside feels colder than the dormitory. Stone walls trap faint echoes of footsteps. Lanterns burn at intervals along the passage. Their flames flicker whenever a draught slips through hidden gaps. Ahead, monks move quietly through the darkness. Black habits, lowered heads, steady pace. No one hurries, no one lingers. The procession feels almost dreamlike. For many religious communities of this period, nighttime prayer formed an essential part of daily life. Long before mechanical clocks became common, bells helped organize the hours, guiding communities through worship, labor, study, and rest. The schedule could feel demanding even in pleasant weather. During an alpine winter, it demanded genuine discipline. You follow at a respectful distance. The stone floor chills your feet through the soles of your boots. The smell of smoke lingers everywhere. Not heavy smoke, just traces, reminders of hearths, candles, lamps, and kitchens working constantly against the cold. The corridor turns, then turns again. The monastery seems larger at night. Buildings often do. Eventually the passage opens into the church. You stop instinctively. The space is beautiful, not beautiful in the rich, jeweled way of great cathedrals, beautiful in the way mountains are beautiful. Simple, solid, quiet. Rows of stone columns rise into shadow. The vaulted ceiling disappears into darkness above. Small lamps burn near the altar, their light trembling across carved wood and pale stone. Candles glow before painted images. Their flames seem tiny against the vast interior, yet they matter. Each one pushes back darkness a little. The monks file into their places. The sound of wool brushing wool drifts softly through the church. Then stillness settles. Outside, the storm continues. Inside, silence answers it. For several heartbeats, nothing happens. Then the chanting begins, low voices, slow voices, voices that have repeated these words thousands of times. The sound fills the church gently, not loudly, not dramatically. It flows through the stone vaults like water through a channel. You do not understand every word. Some are Latin. Some vanish into echoes before reaching you. Yet understanding feels less important than atmosphere. The chanting rises, falls, returns. The rhythm is steady enough that your breathing begins matching it without permission. A lesser-known detail of medieval worship is how much people experienced faith through sound. Many ordinary visitors could not read religious texts, but they knew bells, hymns, prayers, and chants intimately. Sound shaped memory, sound shaped emotion. Sound transformed stone buildings into living spaces. The storm strikes the outer walls. The chanting continues. Snow rattles faintly against a high window. The chanting continues. A draft curls around your ankles. The chanting continues. You begin to understand why monasteries survived in places like this. Not because monks were stronger than mountains. Nobody is stronger than mountains. But because routine offers stability. The world outside changes every hour. Inside these walls, familiar prayers return every day. A strange alpine story comes to mind. In several mountain regions, people once claimed that during severe storms, the dead could be heard singing from distant chapels buried beneath snow. Most likely, shifting wind and echoes inspired such tales. Still, standing here in the dark church while voices drift through stone arches, you can see how such legends took root. The atmosphere encourages imagination. A chant ends, another begins. Time stretches strangely. Minutes feel longer. Thoughts become slower. The warmth of the blankets you left behind starts sounding increasingly attractive, but another part of you enjoys remaining here. Watching, listening, existing between darkness and dawn. Not every detail of monastic worship from remote alpine communities has survived clearly. Some local customs likely varied from house to house. Certain chants changed over generations. Some practices disappeared entirely. Historians reconstruct much from surviving rules, manuscripts, and records, but pieces of everyday experience remain hidden in time. You wonder about the monks who stood here 100 years earlier, and those who will stand here 100 years later. The same stones, the same mountains, the same winter wind, different faces, different lives. Yet the bell will still ring, the chants will still hear, the snow will still gather against the walls. Eventually the office concludes, not abruptly, gradually. Voices fade, heads bow, a final prayer is spoken, then movement returns. The monks depart as quietly as they arrived. You remain seated for a moment longer. The church feels larger now that the chanting has ended. Silence expands into the empty space. A candle flickers near the altar, far above. Darkness fills the vaults, beyond the walls. The storm breathes steadily across the mountainside. You rise and follow the others back toward the corridor. The lantern light seems warmer now. Perhaps because you have been sitting in the church. Perhaps because dawn is slowly approaching. Or perhaps because even the smallest flame looks welcoming after standing between stone, darkness, and snow. The monastery is awake, the night is not yet finished, and somewhere ahead, hidden among corridors and stairways, another bell waits for its hour. You return from the church with the chant still moving inside your chest, not loudly, not as a melody you can hum, more like a rhythm that has settled beneath your breathing. Step, pause, step, lantern glow, stone wall, draft at the wrist. The monastery feels different after the night office, as if the building has quietly reminded everyone that it belongs first to prayer, and only second to travellers, mules, damp boots, and complaints about the weather. The corridor bends away from the guest dormitory. You expect the lay brother to lead you back to your straw pallet, and part of you is already grateful for it. The blanket may scratch like pennant, but it is still a blanket. Yet the old monk who questioned you earlier appears near the corner, carrying a lamp with a shielded flame. He gestures gently, not back to bed. The way you follow, because curiosity remains stronger than wisdom. The passage narrows. The air smells less of smoke here and more of parchment, cold dust, and something faintly sour, like old glue. The monk opens a heavy door, and you step into a room where several small flames burn behind horn panes and glassy scraps of mica. Their light spreads unevenly across desks, shelves, benches, and bundled manuscripts wrapped in leather. The scriptorium. It is colder than you expect. Of course it is. Apparently even books must suffer winter properly. A few monks sit at angled writing desks, wrapped in cloaks over their habits. Their hoods are pushed back just enough to keep shadows from their eyes. One has fingerless mitts. Another breathes into his hands, then takes up his pen again. Their work continues despite the hour, or perhaps has only just resumed after prayer. In this place, Time seems to be cut into thin slices and offered to many duties. A candle flame trembles beside an open page. The ink glistens wetly, then dulls as it dries. The old monk tells you to stand away from the desks, not sharply, carefully. The way a person might speak near sleeping children or fresh bread, you obey at once. You have no wish to become the traveller who ruined a manuscript by dripping snowmelt on a saint's homily. That feels like the kind of embarrassment that follows the soul into the afterlife. A familiar fact of medieval monastic life settles naturally before your eyes. Many monasteries copied, preserved, corrected, and stored books long before printing presses changed Europe. Not every monastery had a grand scriptorium, and not every monk was a scribe. But written work remained one of the great labours of learned, religious houses. Here, even while the storm claws at the roof, letters continue forming line by line. You lean closer to a shelf, not too close. The books are not like modern books. Some are bound in leather over wooden boards. Others are gathered in quires, stacked flat, tied or wrapped. The pages are parchment, made from animal skin, prepared with scraping and stretching and drying. It is durable, expensive, and a little unsettling when you remember what it is. Medieval knowledge often rests on very practical materials. A young monk trims a quill with a small knife. His movements are precise. He scrapes, turns, tests the point, scrapes again, then dips it into ink and writes a few letters on a scrap. The line is too thick. He adjusts the nib, tests again. This time he nods. There is something soothing about watching skilled hands. Outside, the storm is huge and formless. Here, the work is tiny and exact. A curve, a stroke, a space, a correction mark. The page becomes a field where order is planted one letter at a time. Near one desk, a shallow pot holds ink dark as night. The old monk explains that some inks are made with oak galls, iron salts, and binders. You do not fully understand the recipe, but you understand the danger. Cold thickens liquids. A badly chilled ink can resist the pen, blot, fade strangely, or behave in ways that make a scribe consider uncharitable language. The monk at the nearest desk lifts his eyes, as if he has personally considered it often. One small piece of manuscript folklore says scribes sometimes wrote complaints in the margins about cold fingers, poor light, bad parchment, long texts, or simple exhaustion. Some surviving notes are wonderfully human. A copied holy work might end with a weary little line asking for a drink, a prayer, or relief from the labour. Even devotion, it seems, occasionally developed hand cramps. You find that comforting. Saintly patience is impressive. A tired scribe muttering about freezing fingers is easier to love. The old monk shows you a page weighted open with polished stones. The script is neat and black, with red initials beginning certain passages. A small decorated letter curls into a vine shape, painted with care but not extravagance. This is no royal treasure dripping with gold. It is modest, useful, beautiful because someone made it slowly. You ask softly whether the storm makes copying harder. The old monk looks toward the shutter. Snow taps against it in dry bursts. He says winter makes everything harder. Then, or even after a pause, he adds that winter also keeps people indoors. A fair point. Bad weather has always been history's least charming productivity tool. Still, the room shows the cost of such labour. Shoulders bend, eyes strain, hands stiffen, the light is poor, the benches are plain. One monk rubs his wrist, then returns to his line. Another warms his inkpot near a guarded flame, careful not to scorch it. The surviving evidence does not let historians fully measure how many hours any particular Alpine monk spent copying text in a storm like this. Rules, account books, manuscripts, and marginal notes reveal parts of the picture, but daily experience remains partly hidden. Some houses copied frequently, others owned books more than they produced them. Some monks wrote beautifully, Others likely wished God had invented easier alphabets. You smile at that thought, then wisely keep it internal. The old monk moves to a locked chest. From around his neck, he draws a small key. It turns with a dry click. Inside are wrapped documents, sealed packets, and loose letters. He places the messages you carried into the chest beside other folded pieces of the wider world. Your journey has ended for tonight, but the letters continue in intention. They wait. Like travellers under a roof, you feel a strange kinship with them. Outside, snow has blocked the road. Inside, words are protected from damp, theft, fire, and forgetfulness. The chest closes. The key turns again. A simple act, but it feels calm. A gust rolls over the roof. The candle flames bend. One monk lays a hand lightly on the edge of his page to keep it from shifting. Another pauses until the draft settles. Then the scratching resumes. Quills whisper over parchment. A log shifts somewhere in a distant hearth. Snow brushes the shutters. Breath steams faintly in the cold room. You realise that the scriptorium is not warm, not comfortable, and not romantic in the easy way modern imagination sometimes paints it. It is work, patient work, cold work, sacred work, perhaps, but still work. The old monk guides you back toward the door. Before you leave, you glance once more at the scribes. They bend over their pages while the mountain throws winter at the walls. Their ink darkens, their fingers ache, their words remain. The door closes softly behind you. The corridor feels almost warm by comparison, which is a sentence your earlier self would not believe. You follow the lamp back through the sleeping monastery, carrying with you the faint smell of parchment and iron ink, and the memory of small black letters surviving in the middle of a storm. The smell reaches you before the room does. Not food, not smoke, not parchment and ink. Something greener, something sharper. A scent that seems impossible in the middle of an alpine snowstorm. You follow the old monk through another passage branching away from the main corridor. The monastery at night continues revealing hidden layers. What looked from outside like a cluster of stone buildings has become an entire little world connected by stairways. Doors, storerooms, chapels, workrooms, and passages that seem determined to test your sense of direction. You are now thoroughly lost. Fortunately, someone else knows where they're going. The corridor narrows, then widens again. A lamp burns in a niche. Frost traces delicate white patterns along one section of wall where the cold has found a weakness somewhere above. Wind brushes the roof with a dry hiss. Then the monk opens another door. Warmth greets you. Not hearth warmth, something gentler. The room beyond is small but surprisingly comfortable. Shelves cover most of the walls. Bundles hang from rafters overhead. Earthenware jars stand in rows. Wooden boxes are stacked beneath benches. The air smells of dried leaves, roots, flowers, beeswax, vinegar, and faint traces of alcohol. The herbal room, or what later generations might recognise as part pharmacy, part storage chamber, part collection of educated guesses. The old monk smiles slightly. Apparently this room often surprises visitors. It surprises you too. Outside, snow is piling against walls. Inside, summer survives in bundles hanging from beams. You move closer. Lavender, sage, mint, wormwood, rosemary. You recognise some scents immediately. Others are unfamiliar. Some smell pleasant. Others smell like punishment disguised as medicine. A great deal of medieval healthcare relied upon herbs, diet, rest, observation, and accumulated local knowledge. Monasteries often maintained herb gardens when climate permitted and stored dried plants for use throughout the year. The effectiveness of specific treatments varied widely, but religious houses frequently served as important centres of practical care, The monk lifts a small pouch from a shelf. He opens it. A strong scent spills out. You instinctively lean back. He seems amused. Whatever is inside could probably wake the dead, frighten wolves, and strip paint from a door. He explains that it is used to clear breathing passages. Judging by the smell, it clears entire valleys. Nearby sits a table covered with small tools, mortars, pestles, knives, measuring spoons, cloth strips, tiny scales. Some jars bear labels written in careful script. Others rely on memory and experience. A younger brother works quietly near the far wall. He grinds dried leaves into powder with steady circular motions. The stone mortar produces a soft scraping sound. Around him stand half-filled jars and folded packets awaiting storage. The work seems endless, yet there is something peaceful about it. The monastery stores food against winter, wood against winter, knowledge against winter, and here herbs against winter as well. One curious belief from parts of medieval Europe held that certain plants carried protective qualities beyond their physical uses. Herbs might be hung near doors, placed beneath pillows, carried during travel, or stored alongside sacred objects. Practical medicine and spiritual protection often lived comfortably beside one another in the medieval imagination. You examine a bundle hanging near the ceiling. The monk notices. He explains that some herbs must dry slowly, others dry quickly. Some lose strength after a season, others remain useful longer. The details matter. A poorly stored remedy might become useless when needed most. You suddenly appreciate the organization around you. Each shelf represents preparation. Someone gathered these plants months ago beneath summer sunlight. Someone cut them, dried them, sorted them, stored them, labeled them, protected them from damp and pests. Now, during a storm, they wait, a little like the monastery itself. The younger brother finishes grinding his herbs and transfers the powder into a small container. His fingers are stained green. His nose is slightly red from the cold. He looks no older than 20. You ask whether many travellers require treatment. The monk nods. Cuts, falls, fever, exhaustion, bad water, bad food, worse decisions. Travel has always provided doctors with employment. A small laugh escapes you. The monk allows himself a smile. On another shelf sits a collection of roots twisted into strange shapes. One resembles a hand, another resembles a tiny person. The resemblance is accidental, yet strangely unsettling. Stories once circulated across Europe about roots that screamed when pulled from the earth, plants that revealed hidden treasures, and herbs capable of warding off spirits. Such tales travelled easily between villages, monasteries, marketplaces, and campfires. The actual plants were real enough. The stories surrounding them tended to grow more imaginative with each retelling. The monk lifts one of the odd roots. No screaming occurs. This is probably for the best. You continue exploring the shelves. Some jars contain dried berries. Others contain powders. A few contain liquids so mysterious that asking questions feels risky. One bottle holds something floating in pale alcohol. You decide ignorance is healthier. The younger brother begins bundling fresh strips of cloth, bandages. Practical, necessary, far less dramatic than miracle cures. The historical record suggests that monastic healthcare varied greatly between communities. Some houses possessed extensive knowledge and resources, others offered only basic assistance. Researchers still piece together how much care individual monasteries could realistically provide during harsh winters when travel became difficult and supplies limited. This particular monastery seems prepared, not magical, not advanced by modern standards. Prepared, that difference matters. Outside, the storm continues. Inside, people work. That pattern appears again and again. A sudden rattle sounds from beyond the shutter. Snow striking wood. The younger brother glances toward the window automatically, then returns to his task. The reaction fascinates you. No panic, no surprise, simply awareness. The storm is part of life here. You would jump at every noise. The monks classify noises the way merchants classify coins. Interesting. Concerning, routine, very concerning, probably tomorrow's problem. The old monk retrieves a small ceramic cup and pours a warm liquid from a covered pot near the wall. Herbal tea, or the medieval equivalent. He offers it. You accept cautiously. The drink smells strongly of mint and something floral. The taste is better than expected. Not sweet, not luxurious, but warm. Warm counts for a great deal tonight. You sip slowly. The heat spreads through your chest. For a moment, you almost forget the wind. Almost. Then the building creaks. The reminder arrives. The monk takes a seat on a nearby stool. The younger brother continues sorting herbs. The lamp burns steadily. The room feels sheltered in a way that even the guest hall did not. Smaller, more intimate. A place where generations of practical knowledge have accumulated quietly, not through grand discoveries, through repetition, observation, patience. One plant helps, another does not. One remedy works, another fails. Knowledge grows slowly, much like a monastery. You finish the last of the tea, the cup warms your hands for a final few moments. Then it cools. The old monk rises. There are still other corners of the monastery to show you before dawn arrives. The storm remains outside. The herbs remain hanging overhead. Summer preserved against winter. Green memories waiting among stone walls and snow. You take one last breath of rosemary, mint, dried flowers, and old wood before following the monk back into the corridor. Carrying with you the comforting thought that somewhere in the monastery, people have prepared carefully for difficulties long before they arrive. When you leave the herbal room, you expect the monastery to be growing quieter. Instead, it seems to be waking up. Not fully. Dawn still hides somewhere beyond the mountains. The storm continues to sweep across the slopes. The sky outside remains dark enough that the windows show only vague patches of grey. Yet activity is spreading through the buildings like warmth through a cold hand. The old monk leads you down another corridor. This one smells different immediately. Smoke, bread, boiling water, ash, wood. You do not need directions anymore. Your stomach has already identified the destination. The kitchen. Long before you see it, you hear it. A shovel scraping a hearth, the clatter of a pot lid, the crack of splitting wood, the low murmur of voices. Compared with the church, the kitchen feels almost noisy. Compared with a modern kitchen, it remains astonishingly quiet. The door opens, heat rolls outward. You step inside and nearly sigh with gratitude. The room glows with firelight. A large hearth dominates one wall, wide enough to stand inside. Flames dance beneath hanging kettles. Iron hooks descend from beams blackened by generations of smoke. A baker's shovel leans nearby. Stacks of firewood stand neatly arranged along one side of the room. 3 brothers and 2 lay workers are already busy. One kneels near the hearth feeding kindling beneath larger logs. Another stirs a steaming pot. A third carries sacks from a storage alcove. Nobody rushes. Nobody wastes movement. Everything seems practiced. You immediately understand that breakfast does not simply appear. Someone has been awake for quite some time, ensuring it exists. The hearth draws your attention first. It is magnificent, not beautiful in the artistic sense, beautiful in the survival sense. At this moment, the fire feels like the most important invention in human history. You move closer. The heat reaches your face and your fingers loosen. The chill lingering in your shoulders begins to retreat. The smell of burning wood fills the room. Resin pops softly from a log. Sparks spiral upward into darkness above the chimney throat. One worker is feeding pieces of split pine beneath heavier hardwood logs. He explains that different woods burn differently. Some ignite quickly, others burn longer. A mountain monastery cannot afford to treat fuel carelessly. You glance at the woodpile. Every piece represents labour, trees cut, branches trimmed, logs hauled. Wood split, wood stacked. Wood protected from rain and snow. A winter storm transforms firewood from scenery into treasure. The older monk notices your attention. He points toward the storage area. You follow. The storeroom is not large, but every shelf matters. Barrels, sacks, bundles, cheeses wrapped in cloth, dried beans, grain, root vegetables. Everything carefully arranged, everything counted. Life in the Alps rewards preparation and punishes optimism. The brothers learn that lesson long before your arrival. You return toward the hearth. Steam rises from one of the kettles. Inside, oats simmer slowly. Another pot contains vegetable broth left from the previous evening. Nothing useful is quaffed if it can be helped. Many monasteries developed impressive systems for managing food supplies. Survival depended less on abundance and more on consistency. Grain stores, preserved vegetables, dried herbs, and carefully managed livestock could determine whether a community endured a difficult season comfortably or merely endured it at all. A younger lay worker lifts a lid. A cloud of fragrant steam escapes. You catch hints of onion and herbs, nothing extravagant, yet after a night spent listening to wind batter stone walls, the smell seems luxurious. The worker grins at your reaction. Apparently travellers always make the same face. A small loaf sits cooling near the hearth, then another, then several more. Fresh bread. You stare. The worker notices. He laughs quietly. The look on your face apparently requires no translation. Bread fresh from the oven possesses a strange power. Kings understand it. Farmers understand it. Monks understand it. Travellers certainly understand it. The baker eventually slices a piece and hands it to you. Still warm, still fragrant. You thank him. The first bite nearly convinces you to take monastic vows immediately. Fortunately, the feeling passes before any paperwork can begin. Near the far wall hangs a bundle of dried garlic. Another bundle contains onions braided together. A few herbs hang from hooks above the work tables. One lay worker explains that local villagers sometimes insisted garlic protected households from misfortune during winter. Whether that protection extended to storms, sickness, spirits, or troublesome neighbours depended entirely on which villager happened to be telling the story. The explanation earns several amused smiles. The garlic remains hanging. No one appears eager to test the theory by removing it. At another table, a brother is repairing a wooden bucket. The sight surprises you. A kitchen is not merely a place for cooking. It becomes a workshop, a meeting place and a storage room, a planning centre, a source of warmth in harsh climates. One room often serves many purposes. You sit briefly near the hearth while the workers continue. The rhythm of the room becomes soothing. Stir, carry, stack, slice, sweep, repeat. The storm outside feels very far away, not absent, just distant. Its voice reaches you only occasionally now, muffled by thick walls and competing sounds. A sudden gust rattles the chimney. Smoke swirls briefly before finding its path upward again. Nobody reacts. Clearly this happens often. You're beginning to notice a pattern. Things that alarm visitors barely interrupt the monks. One worker tells a story while stacking wood. Years ago, he says, a traveller arrived carrying a rabbit's foot tied to his belt, several holy medals around his neck, and a pouch of mountain herbs sewn into his cloak. The man claimed each item protected against snowstorms. The worker pauses dramatically. The traveller became lost anyway. Fortunately, he found the monastery. Whether the charms failed or succeeded depends entirely on how one chooses to interpret the outcome. The room laughs softly. Even the old monk smiles. The surviving evidence leaves plenty of uncertainty about how widely such protective charms were carried in alpine regions. Some certainly existed. Others may have belonged more to local storytelling than everyday practice. Medieval people could be deeply religious, highly practical, and occasionally superstitious all at once. Human beings remain talented at combining those traits. The baker removes another tray from the oven. Fresh loaves fill the room with rich aroma. For several moments, conversation fades. Bread commands attention. A bell sounds faintly somewhere beyond the kitchen walls. Not the deep bell from the church, a smaller one. The workers immediately adjust their pace. Breakfast approaches. The monastery's schedule continues moving forward regardless of weather. You realise how much effort supports even the simplest meal. Hours of labour. Months of preparation, years of experience, nothing appears by accident. The old monk eventually touches your shoulder lightly. Time to move. There are other parts of the monastery still awake before dawn. You rise reluctantly. Leaving the hearth feels almost irresponsible. The warmth clings to you for a few steps. The smell of bread follows you into the corridor. Behind you, the kitchen continues its quiet labour. Fire crackles, pots simmer, wood shifts, voices murmur. The storm may dominate the mountain outside, but here inside the monastery, another force quietly challenges it. Preparation, patience, routine, and before long, the entire community will gather around the results. For now, you follow the old monk deeper into the waking monastery while the scent of fresh bread lingers stubbornly in your memory. The scent of bread follows you like a friendly ghost. It clings to your cloak as you leave the kitchen passage and step back into the colder corridor. Behind you, the hearth continues its work. Ahead, the monastery gathers itself towards morning. Doors open and close softly. Footsteps pass in neighbouring halls. Somewhere, water is poured into a basin. Somewhere else, a monk coughs with the weary dignity of someone who has been awake far longer than seems fair. The storm has not ended. You hear it before you see it. A low pressure against the walls, a dry rush of snow along the roof, a sudden slap of wind against shutters, as if the mountain has grown impatient with the monastery's stubbornness. The old monk leads you back toward the guest hall, where breakfast is beginning to form around the hearth. The room looks different now, not brighter exactly, because dawn is still weak behind the storm clouds, but more awake. Travellers sit up with blankets around their shoulders. The merchant has returned from the dormitory with his pack still under one arm, because apparently trust did not improve overnight. The pilgrims sit close to the fire, their faces pale and calm. The dog has reclaimed its position beneath the bench. A wise creature. You sit near the hearth and accept a wooden bowl of warm oats. The porridge is thick, plain, and steaming. A little salt has been stirred in. A small piece of bread rests beside it. Dark crust cracked open to reveal a warm centre. After the kitchen's glow, the meal feels like a continuation of fire in edible form. You take the bowl with both hands. Heat gathers in your palms. The first spoonful is bland. The second is comforting. By the third, you are deeply loyal to it. Outside, something heavy shifts. Not a crash. Not exactly. More like a distant, muffled thump, felt in the room before it is heard. Everyone goes still. Even the dog lifts its head. The sound rolls away into the storm, swallowed by snow and stone. No one speaks for several breaths. Then one of the lay brothers at the door exchanges a glance with the old monk. You do not need translation. The mountain has moved. Breakfast continues, but the room has changed. The merchant lowers his spoon. One pilgrim whispers a prayer. The younger traveller stares toward the shutters as if expecting snow itself to enter and explain. A brother comes in from the courtyard, his hood white with fresh flakes. He stamps snow from his boots near the threshold, then speaks quickly to the old monk. His voice remains low, but fragments carry. North slope, lower track, drift, maybe more. The words land heavily. The old monk nods once, then again. He looks toward the travellers. His face remains controlled, but not empty. The road below may be blocked, not surprising, not good. In alpine regions, snow did not merely inconvenience travellers. It could cut off routes completely, bury tracks, erase landmarks, and make familiar slopes dangerous within minutes. Avalanches were understood through experience long before modern snow science explained layers, temperature shifts, slope angles, and wind loading. People knew the mountain could release itself without warning. You look down at your bowl, steam rises quietly. Breakfast suddenly feels like an island. A monk near the doorway adds that the outer gate is partly drifted but clear enough for now. The stable roof held. The woodpile remains covered. Good news. In a practical order, gate, animals, fuel, then people may consider feelings. The merchant finally asks the question everyone has been holding. Can anyone leave today? The old monk answers with care, not yet, perhaps later if the wind drops, perhaps not until tomorrow, perhaps longer. The room receives this with the silence of people rearranging their hopes. The younger traveller lets out a slow breath. The pilgrims bow their heads. The merchant's jaw tightens. You feel a strange mixture of disappointment and relief. Leaving would mean returning to the road. Staying means being trapped with limited comfort, strict routines, cold stone, and porridge that is doing its best. Neither option is ideal. History rarely offers ideal options. It offers weather and asks for your decision. A lay brother brings more bread. The act seems almost ceremonial now. He places pieces near each guest, slightly smaller than last night's portions. You notice, everyone notices, nobody complains. The monastery has begun adjusting. The old monk speaks again, explaining that no traveller is to approach the outer gate without permission. No one should step into the courtyard alone while the wind remains high. Snow can conceal uneven stones, ice, tools, low walls, and holes near drains. It can also make a person vanish between one building and another if visibility worsens. The merchant mutters that he had no wish to die while looking for a privy. The pilgrim beside him nearly laughs into his bowl. The old monk ignores this, which may be mercy. A small story circulates then, offered by one of the lay workers, perhaps to ease the room. He says that in a village below the pass, elders warn children never to shout at a snowy slope, because the mountain listens badly. The idea is half superstition, half practical caution. Loud noise alone rarely explains avalanches. But telling children not to scream near dangerous slopes is not the worst safety policy ever created. The merchant says he will whisper to every mountain from now on. The room softens slightly. Not enough to forget the danger. Enough to breathe again. You eat slowly. The oats thicken as they cool. The bread softens when pressed into them. The fire snaps. Snow taps against the shutters. A second brother arrives, bringing fuller news from the stable yard. The lower path cannot be seen. Drifts have risen against the outer wall. The wind has carved strange ridges across the courtyard. A tree limb has fallen near the covered walk but harmed no one. The muleteer's animals are restless but safe. The merchant asks after his mule immediately. Priorities are revealing. The mule is safe? The merchant relaxes more than when told he himself could remain indoors. You understand. A mule is not just an animal here. It is transport, wealth, labour, luggage, and stubborn personality wrapped in fur. Losing one in a mountain storm could ruin a journey, delay trade, or strand a traveller. The monastery's stables are part of its sheltering purpose as surely as the guest hall. The old monk assigns tasks with quiet authority. 2 brothers will clear the inner path between hall and kitchen. 1 lay worker will check the roof edges. No one goes beyond the outer gate. The stables will be inspected again after the next bell. Guests will remain inside unless called. The structure settles over the room. People calm when someone knows what must happen next. Not everyone agrees with the plan. Perhaps the merchant clearly wants more information. The younger traveller wants certainty. The pilgrims want safety and perhaps a sign from heaven. You want more bread, but this seems like a poor moment to raise the issue. The old monk finishes speaking and moves away. Breakfast resumes in smaller sounds. Spoon against bowl, bread torn in half, fire shifting, wind pressing. The available accounts of mountain travel leave many gaps about how often travellers were stranded in monastic houses by snow, or how long such delays usually lasted. Some storms may have trapped guests for a single night. Others likely held roads for days. The written record tends to remember dramatic rescues, notable visitors, and expenses. While the ordinary waiting between snowfalls often disappears, yet you are living in that ordinary waiting now, the part history forgets because nothing grand has happened. You are simply seated near a fire, eating oats, listening for another sound from the mountain. That is enough. The first pale suggestion of morning appears behind the shutters. Not sunlight, not even brightness, just a less complete darkness. The storm turns the window crack silver. You finish your bowl. A lay brother collects it. No extra crust appears this time. The house has begun counting more tightly. You wipe your fingers on your tunic, then tuck your hands beneath your cloak. The old monk passes near you and pauses. He says the mountain has closed its door for now. The monastery will keep its own open. Then he moves on. You sit with that thought while the fire burns low and the snow continues piling against the world outside. The road is gone. The day has begun anyway. The monastery does not stop working simply because the road has vanished. If anything, the opposite is true. Once breakfast is finished, the brothers disperse through the buildings with renewed purpose. Bowls are cleaned, fires are fed, paths are cleared, doors are checked. The storm may have trapped everyone inside, but being trapped and being idle are very different things. You soon discover this for yourself. The old monk finds you near the hearth and asks a simple question. Would you like to see the animals? Considering your alternatives include staring at shutters for several hours, the answer arrives immediately. A few moments later, you're following him through a covered passage toward the lower part of the monastery. The air grows colder, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that kitchens are special places and should be appreciated more often. Snow has drifted into corners of the courtyard. Brothers carrying shovels move steadily through narrow, cleared paths. Wind pushes loose powder across the ground like pale smoke. The sky remains hidden behind thick cloud. Daylight exists now. Technically, the storm has reduced it to a dim grey glow that seems reluctant to commit itself. The old monk leads you down several worn stone steps. The smell reaches you first. Animals, hay, leather, earth, warm breath. The stable door opens. You step inside and immediately the world changes. The stable is warmer than the courtyard, though not warm enough to make anyone remove a cloak. The heat comes not from fear, but from life. Several animals occupy the long building. Mules stand in their stalls. A few goats cluster together near a partition. Chickens occupy a sheltered corner, somewhere farther back. Something large shifts its weight and snorts. The smell is powerful, not unpleasant. Honest, very honest. A mule lifts its head and examines you. Its expression suggests deep disappointment in humanity. The merchant's mule. Apparently, you recognize it instantly. The animal has the exact look of a creature forced to participate in someone else's plans. A lay worker laughs quietly. She judges everyone. You believe him. The mule continues judging. The old monk walks between the stalls, checking for feed and water. Another brother carries fresh hay from a loft above. Dust floats through beams of grey light entering from small openings near the roof. Animals mattered enormously to mountain communities. A monastery could survive several inconveniences. Losing transport animals was not one of them. Mules carried supplies, letters, tools, food, wine, building materials, and travellers. Without them, mountain routes became far more difficult. A healthy mule represented mobility itself. The merchant's animal finally lowers its head and returns to eating. Apparently you have passed inspection. Barely. You continue deeper into the stable. A goat attempts to nibble your sleeve. You gently rescue the fabric. The goat seems offended. Nearby, another brother repairs a section of wooden fencing damaged during the night. His tools are simple. Hammer, pegs, wood, yet the work is precise. Winter has little patience for neglected repairs. The building creaks softly. Snow presses against the outer walls. Warm breath drifts upward from the animals in pale clouds. For several moments you simply stand and listen, chewing. Shuffling hooves, occasional snorts, the rustle of hay. Compared to the storm outside, and the sounds feel wonderfully ordinary. One of the younger brothers tells a story while working. Years earlier, during another severe winter, a donkey escaped during a snowstorm and somehow found its way back to the monastery after wandering for nearly 2 days. The animal returned unharmed. Nobody ever determined exactly where it had gone. The donkeyist refused all interviews. The mystery remains unsolved. You smile. Stories like that seem to exist wherever people keep animals. A nearby goat sneezes loudly. The timing is excellent. Not all local tales involve heroic animals. However, in some alpine valleys, villagers once claimed that certain mountain spirits disguised themselves as livestock during storms. Most likely, these stories served as warnings to children wandering too far from home. Still, imagining a supernatural goat becomes slightly easier when an actual goat is staring at you with unsettling intensity. This particular goat definitely knows something. What it knows remains unclear. The old monk moves towards a side door. You follow. Beyond it lies a storage chamber connected to the stable. More hay, more feed, more tools, and the room feels almost as important as the kitchen. Everything here represents preparation for bad weather. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is excessive. Each bundle of hay has a purpose. Each sack of grain has been counted. Each tool has a place. You begin noticing this pattern throughout the monastery. Order is not merely a preference. It is survival. Outside, storms create uncertainty. Inside, organization fights back. The old monk explains that the brothers inspect stores regularly during winter. Animals consume more feed during severe weather. Supplies disappear faster than expected. Careful planning prevents unpleasant surprises later. That sounds wise. History contains enough unpleasant surprises already. Near the back of the chamber sits a large wooden sled. You approach it curiously. The monk explains that it is used during heavy snow, transporting supplies, moving firewood, occasionally helping travellers. The sled bears scratches from years of use. Its runners are worn smooth. You run a hand along the wood. Countless winters seem embedded in it. Some historians examining mountain communities have noted how much local survival depended on adapting technology to terrain. A sled may appear simple, yet in deep reaped snow it can outperform wheeled carts entirely. Progress does not always mean complexity. Sometimes it means choosing the right tool for the landscape. The monk nods towards the door. Time to continue. You return to the main stable. The animals remain occupied with their own concerns. Eating, watching, judging. Particularly judging. The merchant arrives briefly to check on his mule. The reunion's touching in its own way. The mule barely acknowledges him. The merchant nevertheless appears reassured. Relationships take many forms. A brother carrying water slips slightly on a damp patch but recovers immediately. No spilled bucket. No disaster. The event earns him a grin from another worker. The atmosphere here feels different from the church, different from the scriptorium, different from the herbal room. Each space reveals another layer of monastery life. Prayer, learning, care, labour. Animals belong firmly to the labour side of the equation. Yet even here there is calm. The rhythm continues. Feed, repair, inspect, repeat. Outside, a fresh gust rattles the walls, snow brushes the roof. The storm reminds everyone that it remains present. The stable answers by continuing its work. One stallion stamps a hoof, a goat complains, hay rustles, The monastery keeps moving. As you prepare to leave, the old monk pauses near the door and glances towards the courtyard beyond. His expression changes slightly. Only slightly, but enough. Something has caught his attention. Not alarm, not yet. Concern. You follow his gaze. Through the crack in the stable door, a figure can be seen hurrying across the snow. A brother from the outer wall. Moving faster than usual, the storm swirls around him. His hood is coated white. His posture carries urgency. The old monk straightens. The stable suddenly feels quieter. The brother reaches the doorway moments later, breathing hard. Snow falls from his shoulders onto the floor. Then he speaks. Someone has been seen on the mountain. The stable becomes silent. Not perfectly silent. Animals still chew. Hay still rustles. Wind still murmurs against the walls. Yet something changes the moment the brother speaks. Someone has been seen on the mountain. The words settle over the room like fresh snow. The old monk does not answer immediately. He studies the messenger's face first, then the snow on his shoulders, then the expression in his eyes. You begin to understand that information is weighed here before it is believed. The messenger pulls back his hood. His cheeks are red from the cold. Snow clings to his beard. I saw movement near the lower ridge. His breathing remains uneven. One person, maybe two. Difficult to tell. The stable seems smaller suddenly. The merchant straightens. The younger brother repairing the fence stops working. Even the goat appears interested. The old monk asks several questions. Where? How far moving? Upward or downward? How long ago? The answers arrive carefully. No one rushes. The mountain punishes assumptions. The figure was distant. Visibility was poor. The storm concealed details. The sighting lasted only moments before snow swallowed everything again. You step closer to the doorway. Through the crack you can see the courtyard. Wind drives loose snow across the stones. The sky remains low and grey. Nothing about the weather encourages travel, which makes the news more troubling. Anyone still outside is in danger. The old monk finally nods. Gather the others. The messenger leaves at once. The atmosphere changes again. The monastery has moved from waiting to decision. You follow the old monk back across the courtyard. Snow crunches beneath your boots. The wind bites exposed skin. The warmth of the stable disappears quickly. A brother crossing towards the kitchen pauses when he sees the monk's expression. No words are exchanged. None are needed. He changes direction immediately. The monastery communicates remarkably well for a place that spends so much time in silence. Inside the guest hall, travellers and brothers begin gathering around the hearth. The merchant arrives first, naturally. He has the instincts of a man who never wishes to miss important information. The pilgrims follow. Several monks enter from adjoining corridors. The room fills with quiet expectation. The old monk waits until everyone has settled. Then he explains, a possible traveller has been sighted beyond the lower ridge. No confirmation, no certainty, only possibility. The merchant exhales slowly. One of the pilgrims closes his eyes briefly. You feel a knot form in your stomach. You remember the road, the snow, the disappearing tracks. Even arriving at the monastery yesterday had been difficult. Spending another night outside would be far worse. A younger monk asks whether the figure could simply be a shepherd. The old monk shakes his head. Not in weather like this. The answer feels sufficient. A discussion follows, measured, calm, no raised voices. Yet beneath the calm lies urgency. One brother argues that visibility remains too poor. Another points out that waiting may make rescue impossible later. A third notes that the storm appears slightly weaker than it was during the night. The merchant quietly mutters that people on mountains never seem to choose convenient time for emergencies. Nobody disagrees. You sit near the fire and listen. The flames shift and crackle softly. Steam rises from damp cloaks hung near the wall. Outside, the storm continues brushing against the monastery like a persistent animal. One older brother tells a brief story. Many winters earlier, another traveller had reached the monastery half frozen after wandering for nearly an entire day in whiteout conditions. The man survived because he noticed smoke rising above the trees and followed it. Smoke saved him, the brother says. Another monk shakes his head. God saved him. The first monk smiles, perhaps through smoke. A few quiet laughs pass around the room. The tension eases slightly, not much, enough. The old monk eventually makes his decision. A small search party will prepare. Not immediately, preparation first, ropes, lanterns, extra cloaks, food. If the weather worsens, they will wait. If conditions hold, they will go. Simple, practical, final. The room accepts it. That acceptance fascinates you. Modern people often imagine endless discussion before action. Here, responsibility sits clearly on certain shoulders. Advice may be offered, questions may be raised, but eventually someone decides. The monastery returns to motion. Brothers leave to gather supplies. The merchant wanders toward the door, then stops himself. Curiosity and self-preservation appear to be wrestling inside him. Self-preservation wins, barely. The pilgrims remain near the fire. One of them begins quietly repairing a loose strap on his pack. The small task seems oddly comforting. Around the hall, everyday life continues alongside concern. A lay brother sweeps melted snow from the floor. Another adjusts drying cloaks. The dog changes sleeping positions. The fire consumes another log. Life rarely pauses completely for uncertainty, and it simply makes room for it. You help where you can. Not heroically. A bucket needs carrying, blankets need moving, wood needs stacking. Useful work calms restless thoughts. The old monk passes through the hall several times during the next hour. Each trip reveals another piece of preparation. Coiled rope, a lantern, extra mittens, waxed cloth, a small sack of food, nothing dramatic, just the equipment required to survive mountains. One young brother checks a lantern 3 separate times. The merchant watches him and finally says, if it needs checking a 4th time, perhaps the lantern wishes to stay inside. The young brother actually laughs, a rare victory. Near midday, the storm softens slightly, not enough to reveal blue sky, not enough to expose distant peaks, but enough. The wind loses some of its edge. Snow falls more gently. Shapes emerge beyond the walls. The old monk steps outside for several minutes. When he returns, his decision has already been made. The search party will go. The room becomes very still. You feel your pulse quicken, not because you are going, you are not. Guests remain inside, yet the idea itself changes everything. Until now, the storm has been something observed through walls. Now people will enter it. A brother brings in the ropes. Another distributes heavier cloaks. The preparations continue with remarkable efficiency. No speeches, no dramatic declarations, only work. You find yourself standing near the doorway, watching. Snow drifts through the courtyard beyond. The bell tower rises above white roofs. Lantern light flickers beneath covered walkways. The monastery feels both fragile and strong. Fragile because the mountains surrounding it are enormous. Strong because everyone inside knows exactly what to do next. The old monk pauses beside you. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Then he looks toward the storm. Sometimes, he says quietly, people find the monastery. He watches the swirling snow, and sometimes the monastery must find them. The words linger. Outside, the search party begins gathering near the gate. Inside, the fire burns steadily. The next chapter of the day is about to begin. The gate is not opened at once. Before any bar is lifted, before any boot crosses the threshold, The search party gathers beneath the covered walk like a small knot of shadow and wool. 4 brothers stand there, each wrapped in heavy cloaks, hoods pulled close, gloves tied at the wrists with cord. A lay worker joins them, broader than the others, carrying a coil of rope across one shoulder. The porter waits by the gate with his hands on the wooden bar. No one looks heroic. That is important. Heroism in songs tends to shine. Heroism in snow looks mostly damp, practical, and slightly worried. You stand near the guest hall doorway with the other travellers, watching from the edge of permission. The old monk has made it very clear that guests are not to join the search. You would like to feel insulted by this lack of confidence, but your legs remember yesterday's climb and quietly agree with him. The merchant stands beside you, arms folded, eyes narrow. The pilgrims stand a little behind, whispering together. The dog has followed everyone and now sits just inside the doorway, apparently supervising. Near the gate, a younger monk checks the lanterns again, not 3 times now, 2. Progress. The lamps are shielded against wind, their flames small and stubborn. One brother carries a pouch with bread, cheese, and a small flask. Another has strips of cloth tucked into his belt. A third holds a staff taller than himself, useful for testing snow depth, hidden holes, and the confidence of anyone tempted to step too quickly. The rope receives the most attention. It is uncoiled, inspected, recoiled, and divided into loops. The lay worker runs it through his hands slowly, feeling for weak spots. The rope is thick, rough, made from hemp or flax, and worn smooth in places by use. It smells faintly of fibre, smoke, and old damp. A simple object, yes, but in deep snow, on a slope where one bad step can pull a person downhill, rope becomes and truss made visible. The old monk speaks to the group. His instructions are calm. Stay within sight if possible. Keep the rope between men. Do not descend beyond the marked stones unless the figure is seen again. Listen for the bell. Return if the wind rises. Return if snow thickens. Return if the slope speaks. That last phrase is not explained. No one asks. You imagine a mountain slope speaking through cracking snow, shifting ice, or low sound underfoot. You decide you would prefer not to hear it. A brother near the gate ties a small cloth bundle beneath his cloak. One of the pilgrims notices and asks what it holds. The brother answers simply, bread, a wax tablet, a little blessed salt. The merchant raises an eyebrow. The brother catches the look and shrugs. Bread for hunger, wax for a message, salt because old men insist on salt. The porter, Sundihaster, who is older, says nothing. His expression says plenty. The merchant wisely does not continue. In mountain regions, practical caution and inherited belief often walked side by side. A rope could be checked carefully, while a charm or blessed token might still be carried. A person could understand snow from experience and still respect stories handed down by elders. Humans are rarely as tidy as later categories make them seem. The porter finally lifts the bar. The sound is heavy. It travels through the courtyard like a decision. 2 brothers take hold of the gate and pull. Snow resists from outside. For several moments, nothing moves. Then the lay worker joins them. The gate opens inward by inches, pushing against a bank of drifted snow packed at its base. Cold air spills through the widening gap. It enters the courtyard in a rush, sharper than before, carrying flakes, ice dust, and the wild, clean scent of open storm. Everyone steps back instinctively. The dog retreats first, very wise. The search party moves forward. One brother goes ahead with the staff, probing the ground beyond the gate. The next holds the rope. The others follow at measured intervals. Their bodies disappear almost immediately into the pale churn beyond the wall. Not fully. You can still see them, but less clearly with each step. Dark shapes, lantern glows, a rope line. Then snow draws a veil over them. The porter and old monk remain by the open gate for several breaths, watching. Then the gate is pulled mostly closed, not barred fully, only held ready. The courtyard seems emptier at once. A person leaving into danger changes a place even after the door shuts. You remain near the guest hall doorway, listening. Wind, snow, the faint creak of the gate, your own breathing. The merchant mutters, "Too much risk for a shadow." One of the pilgrims answers softly, "A shadow may still be a man." The merchant does not reply. His face tightens. Perhaps he knows this already. Inside the hall, people return slowly toward the hearth, but nobody settles properly. The mood has become uneven, restless. A bowl is moved, a cloak adjusted, a log placed on the fire. Small tasks pretend to be enough. You help carry a bundle of dry kindling from the side room. It gives your hands something to do. A lay brother thanks you with a nod and adds the wood carefully near the hearth. He does not throw all of it onto the flames. The storm may last. Every useful thing is rationed by thought before it is touched by fire. The old monk enters after speaking with the porter. Snow clings to his shoulders. His face is calm, but his eyes are not idle. He asks the younger traveller to fetch more cloth from the guest room. He asks the pilgrims to sit near the fire and keep warm. He asks you to help move 2 benches aside. Space may be needed if someone returns injured or unable to stand. The request lands quietly. Space may be needed. You and the merchant move the benches. The legs scrape across stone. The sound seems too loud. Once the space is clear, the hall looks different, like a room holding its breath. The younger traveller returns with cloths. A brother brings a basin. Another brings warm water from the kitchen. The herbal room sends a small pouch and a jar sealed with wax. Preparations spread without panic. The monastery has done this before, or something close enough. No one can know how often remote houses like this mounted searches in snow. Some records mention rescues and losses. Many ordinary efforts vanished without being written down. A missing traveller might become one line in an account, one memory in a community, or nothing at all. Yet the ropes, lanterns, and practiced motions in this hall suggest that danger is not rare enough to be unfamiliar. Time stretches. The first quarter hour feels long, the next feels longer. The storm outside softens, then rises again. You keep glancing toward the door. Everyone does. The old monk pretends not to. A bell sounds once from the tower, not the full call to prayer, a signal, one clear note. Then silence. The room freezes. A moment later, the porter's voice comes from the courtyard. Not words yet. A shout, then another. The old monk moves quickly. So do the brothers. You follow as far as the doorway, stopping where you have been told to stop. Snow swirls beyond the covered walk. The gate stands open wider now. Shapes appear through the whiteness. First a lantern, then a hooded figure, then another. The rope stretches between them, tight. Someone is being guided in the middle, bent low, stumbling. Not one of the monks, a traveller, alive. The courtyard fills with motion. Brothers move forward to help. The porter braces the gate. The search party comes in slowly, step by step, bringing the storm with them on their cloaks. You feel the room behind you stir, the fire snaps, the cleared space waits, and the monastery, which only moments ago seemed to be listening, begins to act. The traveller does not walk into the monastery. The monastery carries him in. 2 brothers support him beneath the arms while the lay worker steadies the rope behind. Snow covers his cloak so completely that he seems carved from the storm itself. White crusts cling to his hood, shoulders, sleeves, and beard. Ice has formed along the edges of his clothing, where melted snow froze again. For one strange moment, he looks less like a person and more like a piece of winter that has wandered through the gate. Then he coughs, a harsh, painful sound, human, very human. The courtyard erupts into motion, not panic, purpose. The old monk points toward the guest hall. A brother hurries ahead to clear the path. Another takes the traveller's pack. A third shuts the gate behind them. The heavy bar drops back into place with a solid thud. Outside remains outside. Inside begins the work of saving someone. You step aside as the group enters the hall. Warmth meets cold. Firelight meets snow. The traveller sways dangerously. His boots leave wet marks across the stone floor. One glove slips off and lands beside a bench. A brother picks it up immediately. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ignored. The cleared space near the hearth suddenly makes perfect sense. The brothers lower him carefully onto a blanket spread across the floor. His face finally becomes visible. Older than you expected, perhaps 50. Perhaps younger and simply worn by hard roads. Winter has a habit of adding years where it pleases. His cheeks are pale beneath a reddened nose. Ice crystals cling to his beard. His eyelids flutter weakly. His lips move, but no clear words emerge. The old monk kneels beside him, not dramatically, not with grand speeches, just quietly. He touches the man's wrist, checks his breathing, feels the cold through the soaked clothing. Around him, the monastery moves like a machine built from patience. The basin arrives, warm cloths arrive. The herbal jar arrives, dry blankets arrive. Even the dog seems to understand something important is happening. It retreats beneath a bench and watches with unusual seriousness. You find yourself holding a folded blanket without remembering who handed it to you. Someone points, you pass it forward, the blanket disappears into the effort. Another request follows. More cloth, more water, a wooden stool. The hall becomes a chain of small actions. No single act appears remarkable. Together they matter enormously. The traveller begins shivering violently. At first the movement seems encouraging, then less so. The old monk says something to one of the younger brothers, who immediately runs toward the herbal room. The merchant stands near you, unusually silent. Finally he speaks. I thought it was a shadow. You know exactly what he means. Neither of you says more. The traveller is not dying, at least not immediately. Yet the sight of him changes the day. Everyone in the room understands how easily the mountain could have kept him. A few steps farther from the path, a few more hours in the storm, a little less luck. The difference between survival and tragedy often appears disturbingly small. The search party begins removing his outer cloak. Slowly, carefully, the fabric is stiff with frozen snow. Water drips onto the floor as ice melts near the hearth. Beneath the cloak, additional layers appear. Wool, leather, more wool, everything damp, everything cold. Travellers crossing difficult routes often wore multiple layers rather than relying on a single heavy garment. Wool remained especially valuable because it retained some insulating ability even when wet. Looking at the man now, you feel grateful for every layer he chose to carry. One brother hangs the soaked clothing near the fire. Steam immediately begins rising. The traveller opens his eyes briefly. Confusion crosses his face, then relief. Then confusion again, the expressions pass quickly. His gaze moves around the hall. Fire, monks, travellers, walls, roof. Safety takes time to recognise when someone has spent hours expecting danger. The younger brother returns carrying a small cup. A strong herbal scent accompanies him. The old monk helps the traveller drink a little. Not much, enough. The man coughs again. This time words emerge. Broken pieces, a name, a village, something about the ridge. Nobody presses him. Questions can wait. Warmth cannot. The pilgrims begin helping as well. One folds blankets. Another heats cloth near the fire before passing it forward. The merchant contributes a strip of clean linen from his own pack. He pretends not to care afterward. Nobody believes him. The hall gradually settles into a quieter rhythm. Urgency remains, fear lessens. The traveller continues improving in small increments. Colour returns slowly to his face. His hands tremble less violently. His breathing steadies. The old monk finally sits back, not relaxed, satisfied, a meaningful difference. You notice how tired the search party looks now that they have stopped moving. Snow still melts from their cloaks. One brother rubs his shoulder where the rope had rested. Another removes a glove and flexes stiff fingers. The lay worker accepts a cup of warm drink from the kitchen and drains it immediately. Only now does the effort become visible. Rescue always looks simpler after success. The storm outside continues blowing against the walls. Inside, However, another atmosphere begins forming. Relief. Not not celebratory, just relief. A younger monk asks the traveller what happened. The man closes his eyes briefly before answering. His voice remains rough. He lost the road. Simple words, terrifying meaning. A marker stone disappeared beneath drifting snow. The path vanished. Wind erased his tracks almost immediately. He walked, turned, walked again. Nothing looked familiar. Soon every direction became the same. White sky, white ground, white air. You can almost feel it while listening. The endless confusion, the shrinking world, the growing certainty that something is wrong. The traveller remembers seeing a bell tower briefly through the storm, then losing sight of it, then finding it again. That glimpse kept him moving. The merchant mutters that bell towers should be larger. A pilgrim replies that mountains should be smaller. Neither solution seems likely. A faint smile appears on the traveller's face, his first smile. A good sign. As the afternoon slowly advances, the storm outside weakens further, not dramatically, just enough. The courtyard becomes slightly more visible through the shutters. Snow still falls. Wind still moves, but the violence has softened. The monastery begins relaxing as well. Brothers return to interrupted tasks. Wood is restacked. Tools are collected. The rope is dried near the hearth. The lanterns are inspected and returned to storage. Normal life carefully reassembles itself. You sit near the fire watching it happen. The rescued traveller sleeps now beneath several blankets. His boots dry nearby. His pack rests against the wall. His existence has altered the entire day. Without him, the storm would have remained an inconvenience. With him, it became a reminder. The mountain is beautiful. The mountain is dangerous. Both things can be true at once. The old monk passes by carrying a cup. He pauses briefly. His eyes rest on the sleeping traveller, then on the search party, then on the fire. Finally, he nods to himself and continues on. No speech, no congratulations, just a small acknowledgement that the right thing happened. Sometimes that is enough. The fire burns steadily. The rescued man sleeps. The storm drifts across the mountains beyond the walls, and for the first time since dawn, the monastery feels less like a fortress under siege and more like what it was always meant to be, a refuge. The searchers do not speak much at first. They sit near the hearth with wet cloaks steaming around them, each man wrapped in the private assurance that follows danger. The lay worker holds a cup between both hands and stares into it as if the ale might explain what happened outside. One monk flexes his fingers slowly. Another leans forward, elbows on knees, head bowed, not quite praying, not quite resting. The rescued traveller sleeps beside the fire. Every few breaths he shivers, not violently now, only enough to remind the room that the mountain has not fully released him. You sit on a bench with your cloak around your shoulders, listening to water drip from drying garments onto the stone floor. Each drop sounds larger than it should. Drip, pause, drip. The rhythm becomes strangely calming, like a small clock made of melting snow. The gate is barred again. The rope has been hung near the hearth. Lanterns sit on the table, their glass cloudy with moisture. The search is over, but its traces remain everywhere. A brother brings more warm water. Another sets a bowl of broth near the rescued man, ready for when he wakes. The old monk moves through the hall quietly, checking each member of the search party with his eyes before asking any question. He does not fuss, he does not flatter them. He simply confirms that they are present, breathing, and able to answer. Eventually the lay worker speaks. He describes the path beyond the gate, not as a story yet, more as pieces, snow up to the knee in places, hard crust in others, a hollow near the fallen pine, the ridge marker almost buried, wind shifting direction every few minutes. The old monk listens closely, so do the others. The details matter because tomorrow may ask for them again. The brother with the staff adds that the traveller was not on the main track when they found him. He had wandered down slope, toward a stand of dark pines barely visible through the snow. If he had gone farther, the slope beyond dropped sharply into a ravine. The merchant breathes out through his nose. That is all. For once, no joke. A pilgrim murmurs a prayer. The rescued man turns slightly beneath the blankets, but does not wake. You imagine him in the white world outside, seeing trees, thinking perhaps they meant shelter, not knowing how close the ground fell away beyond them. The thought makes your hands tighten around your cup. The lay worker points toward the rope. Without that, one of us would have gone with him. Nobody argues. Rope, staff, lantern, bell, gate, fire. The rescue feels less like a single brave act and more like a chain. Remove one link, and everything changes. The monastery has become very good at chains. A young brother kneels by the hearth and begins drawing the rope more carefully. He stretches each section near the warmth, then turns it, fingers moving slowly along the fibres. The act looks almost tender. A wet rope left to freeze could become stiff, dangerous, useless when needed next. Tools have to be cared for, especially when tools are what stand between a person and the ravine. The rescued traveller wakes near midday. His eyes open suddenly. He looks startled, as if he has returned from a place where waking was not guaranteed. The old monk is beside him at once. No rush, just presence. The man takes a little broth. His hands shake as he holds the bowl, so the monk steadies it without comment. Pride is allowed to remain intact when possible. That, too, is a kind of mercy. The traveller's name is Martin. He says it after several attempts. He is a courier, though not one of great importance. He adds quickly, as if embarrassed by the trouble he has caused. He was carrying messages between valley towns when the storm caught him. He thought he could reach the monastery before nightfall. He had crossed nearby routes before. He knew enough to be cautious. Then he laughs once, weakly. Not enough. The merchant nods. That is usually the exact amount men know. This time, Martin smiles properly. It changes his face. He looks younger, with warmth returning to him. The old monk asks about companions. None. Animals. None. Letters. Martin's expression changes. His pack. A brother brings it from near the wall. The leather is soaked but intact. Ice has melted from the straps. Martin reaches for it too quickly, winces, and lets the brother open it instead. Inside are wrapped packets, sealed against damp as well as the road allowed. The old monk examines them, then places them near the hearth, but not too close. Paper and parchment must be warmed carefully. People too. Too much heat too quickly can harm both. Martin closes his eyes. Relief moves across his face. Not because the letters are more important than his life, but because duty survived with him. You understand that feeling from the messages you carried into the scriptorium chest. Words move slowly through this world, but they matter. A letter can change a trade, settle an account, summon help, report a death, confirm a marriage, or carry news across a mountain where spoken voices cannot pass. The pilgrims ask whether he saw anyone else. Martin shakes his head. Only snow, only pines. Only once, he says. He thought he heard a bell underground. The room stills slightly. The old porter, standing near the doorway, snorts. Not underground, the tower. Martin shakes his head again, faintly stubborn. It came from below. The porter looks ready to dismiss this, then stops. The lay worker says wind does strange things among the rocks. Another brother says the chapel bell can echo from the lower cliff. The pilgrim says perhaps a saint wished to be helpful. The merchant says if saints are helping, they might consider clearer directions. Even Martin laughs at that, though it turns into a cough. No one settles the matter. No one needs to. The bell, wherever he heard it, kept him moving. In a place where stone cliffs throw sound from one slope to another. Certainty is a luxury. A bell may be above, below, behind, ahead, or inside a frightened mind that desperately wants shelter. The result is what matters. He followed it. By afternoon, the snow softens into smaller flakes. The storm is not finished, but its anger has drained away. The courtyard appears through the shutters in pale shapes. The covered walk, the woodpile, the stable roof, the gate. Half buried at its base again, brothers move outside with shovels, clearing what must be cleared before evening hardens everything into ice. Life resumes carefully. The search party eats, Martin sleeps again. The merchant checks on his mule and returns looking offended by its continued indifference. The pilgrims help fold cloths. You carry damp items from bench to peg, from peg to drying line, from drying line closer to the hearth when space opens. The work is small, repetitive, and calming. A rescued life does not end the day. It adds more work to it. That seems exactly right. As the light begins to dim, the old monk stands by the cleared space near the hearth and looks at the floor where snow melters pulled. He asks for more rushes. A brother brings them. Fresh dry stalks are spread over the damp stone. The smell rises at once, clean and grassy, a memory of summer beneath winter's boots. You breathe it in. The monastery has taken the storm inside and is slowly drying it, warming it, feeding it, turning it back into human order. Martin sleeps, the ropes dry. The gate holds. The mountain has taken nothing today, not yet. And as evening begins to gather beyond the shutters, the hall feels older, quieter, and somehow more deeply alive than before. By evening, the storm has become a memory that still exists. It has not vanished. It has simply retreated a little from the centre of everyone's thoughts. Snow continues falling beyond the walls. Wind still wanders through the valleys. The mountain remains enormous, cold, and entirely uninterested in human plans. Yet after the rescue, after the drying of ropes and cloaks, after the steady work of the day, a different mood settles over the monastery. The fire burns brighter tonight, or perhaps it only feels that way. You sit near the hearth with Martin resting on a bench nearby, wrapped in enough blankets to resemble a small hill. Colour has returned to his face. His hands no longer shake when he lifts a cup. Every so often someone checks on him without making it obvious. The old monk is particularly skilled at this. He crosses the hall, pauses, glances, continues walking. The result is identical to asking how someone feels, but with less fuss. The evening meal is simpler than yesterday's, yet somehow it feels richer. A thick vegetable broth, fresh bread from the morning baking, a little cheese, warm drink, nothing rare, nothing expensive. But meals shared after danger often taste better than meals shared before it. The merchant certainly thinks so. He tears off a piece of bread and declares that rescue improves appetite. A pilgrim replies that surviving generally helps. Martin smiles weakly over his bowl. The room laughs. The sound lingers longer than expected. Laughter has been scarce today. Outside, darkness gathers. Inside, lamps are lit one by one. Their small circles of light spread across the walls. Shadows shift along beams overhead. The smell of rushes, smoke, wool, and broth mingles into something that now feels unmistakably like the monastery itself. A place develops its own scent. You realize that. Not a single smell. A collection. A memory made from many small things. You suspect that years from now, if if someone handed you a cloak carrying traces of smoke, old wood, wet stone, and rosemary, your mind would return instantly to this hall. Martin speaks more as the evening continues, not because anyone questions him, because he wishes to. Sometimes people tell stories to explain events. Sometimes they tell stories because remaining stagnant feels strange after nearly disappearing from the world. He describes the route he intended to take, the ridge, the marker stones, the small shrine beside the path, the frozen stream, the pine grove. As he talks, the brothers occasionally nod. They know these places. The mountain exists in their minds as clearly as the monastery. Every slope has a name, every bend has a memory, every dangerous section has a history attached to it. Martin admits that he ignored one warning, not a warning from another person, a warning from himself. The weather felt wrong earlier than expected. The clouds moved differently. The wind changed direction. He noticed all of it, then convinced himself he still had enough time. The merchant groans. That is always how trouble begins. Nobody disagrees. The old monk, who has been listening from across the room, finally speaks. The mountain is patient. That is all. Yet the sentence settles over the hall. The mountain is patient. It does not chase. It does not hurry. It simply waits for mistakes. Martin nods slowly. A silence follows. Not uncomfortable, thoughtful, near the fire. One of the younger brothers begins mending a glove damaged during the search. His needle flashes briefly in the firelight. Stitch, pull, stitch, pull. The small repair feels symbolic somehow. The monastery spends much of its life repairing things. Gloves, roofs, doors, ropes, people. The dog emerges from beneath its bench and circles twice before lying down closer to Martin than usual. The movement earns approval from several observers. The merchant claims the dog has recognized a fellow survivor. The dog declines comment. As darkness deepens, stories begin appearing naturally. No one announces them. They simply emerge. A lay worker recalls a winter when snow buried the lower gate completely. Another remembers carrying supplies by sled across drifts taller than a man. A pilgrim tells of spending a night in a roadside chapel so small that he had to sleep sitting upright. The merchant immediately claims victory. Everyone asks why. Because I was not there. Even the old monk smiles, only briefly. But you catch it. One story leads to another. Soon the hall feels less like a shelter and more like a gathering place. Not because the danger has vanished, because everyone has accepted it. The storm remains outside, the mountain remains outside, the walls remain between. A brother mentions an old carved stone somewhere higher on the pass. Travellers once touched it for luck while crossing. Another brother insists people touched it because the path narrowed there and everyone needed balance. The argument lasts perhaps 30 seconds. Neither man convinces the other. Both seem content with that outcome. The conversation moves on. You notice how often certainty is unnecessary here. Not every mystery requires solving. Not every story requires proving. Sometimes a tale survives because it is told, not because it is verified. Martin eventually grows tired. His voice weakens. The old monk notices before anyone else. Of course he does. The conversation gently shifts away from him. A blanket is adjusted. Another cup is offered. The rescued traveller settles back onto the bench. This time, when he closes his eyes, the room no longer worries. He looks like a man preparing for sleep rather than a man fighting the cold. The difference is enormous. The bells ring somewhere deeper within the monastery. Evening prayers approach. Several brothers rise. Others remain behind to tend the hall. The rhythm continues. It always continues. That realization comforts you. Yesterday you arrived through snow and uncertainty. Today a man was pulled back from the mountain. Tomorrow the bells will ring again. The kitchen fire will be lit. The animals will need feeding. The paths will need clearing. Life moves forward through repetition. Outside, The storm writes temporary shapes in snow. Inside, routine writes more durable ones. The fire burns lower. Another log is added. The sparks rise. The merchant finally leans back against the wall and folds his arms. The pilgrims sit quietly. Martin sleeps. The dog sleeps. The monastery breathes around you. Not through lungs, through people, through works, through bells, through small acts repeated over generations. And as the evening settles fully over the mountain, you begin to understand why travellers remember places like this long after roads, inns, and weather have been forgotten. Not because they are grand, because they endure. The bells draw some of the brothers away. Their dark figures disappear into the corridors, carrying lantern light with them. For a few moments, Magdal, the guest hall grows quieter. The evening stories settle into embers, much like the fire itself. You remain near the hearth. It has become your favourite place in the monastery, not because it is beautiful, because it is reliable. The fire asks very little of you. Feed it wood, stay reasonably close, avoid stepping into it. In return, it provides warmth, comfort, and the illusion that winter is someone else's problem. A fair exchange. The merchant appears to agree. He has claimed a position near the wall that allows him to monitor the door, the fire, his pack, and anyone approaching his pack. This arrangement seems to satisfy him completely. Martin sleeps peacefully now. The blankets rise and fall with steady breaths. The dog remains nearby, still supervising. The pilgrims have moved closer to the hearth as well. One is quietly repairing a tear in his cloak. The other studies the flames as if they contain hidden wisdom. Perhaps they do. Fire has inspired people to stare thoughtfully at it for thousands of years. Outside, darkness deepens. The storm has weakened further. Snow still falls, but more gently now, occasionally through the gaps around the shutters. You glimpse pale movement beyond the walls. The mountain is still there, waiting, listening, breathing beneath its blanket of snow. A younger brother enters carrying a bundle of candles. He places them carefully in a wooden chest near the wall. The merchant watches. How many candles does a monastery use? The brother pauses. More than we would like. A reasonable answer. The conversation continues. The brother explains that candles are valuable. Wax must be gathered, traded for, purchased or donated. Lamps require oil. Both provide light. Neither appears magically. The merchant nods. Everything in this monastery seems connected to effort. Light requires labour. Warmth requires labour. Food requires labour. Safety requires labour. Even silence appears to require labour. The younger brother finishes storing the candles and begins trimming wicks on several lamps. The task is oddly fascinating. Small scissors, tiny adjustments, careful attention. A poorly maintained lamp smokes more heavily, consumes fuel faster, produces poorer light. Tiny details matter. You are beginning to suspect that medieval life consists largely of tiny details preventing larger disasters. The old monk eventually returns from prayer. His pace remains steady. His expression remains calm. Yet something about him feels lighter tonight. Perhaps it is simply relief. A rescued traveller. A stable roof intact. A gate still standing. In a mountain monastery during winter. Those count as victories. He settles near the fire with a wooden cup. Not among the guests exactly. Not apart from them either. The distance between monk and traveller seems smaller than it did yesterday. A long day can do that. For a while, nobody speaks. The silence feels comfortable. Wood shifts in the hearth. A log collapses inward. Sparks rise. The dog snores softly. The sound surprises everyone. The merchant laughs first. Soon several others join him. Even the dog seems startled by its own snore. A brief moment of absurdity passes through the room, then calm returns. One of the pilgrims eventually asks the old monk a question. How long has he lived here? The monk studies the fire before answering, most of his life. The answer encourages more questions. Did he ever wish to leave sometimes? Did he leave sometimes? Did he always return? Yes. The room grows thoughtful. The merchant asks why. The monk considers, then gestures toward the wall. The mountain changes. The travellers change, or the seasons change. His eyes move toward the fire. The work remains. Simple words, yet they linger. You find yourself imagining decades passing through these halls. Different storms, different guests, different dogs, probably. Yet the same bells continue marking the hours. The same hearth continues warming cold hands. The same gate continues opening and closing. A strange comfort lives in continuity. Martin wakes briefly. The old monk notices immediately. Of course, a cup appears. A blanket is adjusted. A few quiet words are exchanged. The traveller drinks, then settles again. His strength is returning, slowly, the way winter retreats, not all at once. A lay worker enters carrying a small wooden box. He places it beside the old monk. The box contains repaired items collected during the day. A glove, a buckle, a leather strap, a knife sheath, nothing remarkable. Yet each object represents something preserved from becoming useless. The merchant examines the repaired strap. Better than before, the lay worker shrugs. That may be the highest praise he receives all month. The conversation drifts toward roads, not tomorrow's roads. Older roads, routes crossing valleys, passes leading toward distant towns. A brother recalls an old bridge swept away years earlier. Another remembers a path abandoned after repeated rockfalls. The mountain shapes travel constantly. A route trusted for generations may become dangerous after one harsh winter. A forgotten trail may become useful again decades later. Nothing remains entirely fixed. The pilgrims listen closely. Travellers always care about roads. Roads determine where stories begin and end. Outside, the wind fades almost completely. The change happens so gradually that no one notices at first. Then someone does. The hall grows quieter. Not because people stop speaking, because something has stopped speaking outside. The absence becomes noticeable. You look toward the shutters. No rattling, no scraping, no sudden gusts. Only occasional falling snow. The old monk hears it too, or rather, hears the lack of it. He rises and crosses toward the door. Several others follow. You join them. The outer door opens. Cold air enters, but gently. The courtyard beyond lies beneath fresh snow. White, still, peaceful. The bell tower rises against a sky that has begun to clear. A few stars appear between drifting clouds. The sight draws a quiet breath from everyone present. Not amazement, recognition. The storm is ending. Not finished completely, but ending. Tomorrow will bring work, shoveling, repairs, decisions about roads, questions about travel. Yet tonight offers something rare. A pause. The monastery stands beneath fresh snow and emerging stars. The gate remains closed. The fire remains warm behind you. The people inside remain safe, for now. That's enough. You stand in the doorway for a few moments longer, watching faint starlight appear above the mountains. Then you return to the hearth, carrying the cold on your cloak and the quiet certainty that the long storm is finally beginning to release its grip. The monastery feels different once the stars appear. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. The same walls stand where they stood yesterday. The same bell tower rises above the courtyard. The same doors, beams, benches, and stone passages remain exactly where they were before the storm arrived. But now the sky has opened. You notice it every time someone enters from outside. A little starlight comes with them. Not much, just enough. The heavy ceiling of cloud that pressed against the mountain all day has broken apart. Between the drifting fragments, cold stars shine above the Alps. They seem impossibly distant, impossibly calm, as though the storm never happened. You sit near the hearth after the evening meal, Listening to the monastery settle toward night once again, the fire burns lower than before. Not because fuel is scarce, because the urgency has passed. Yesterday every flame felt like a defence. Tonight it feels like companionship. Martin sits upright now, still wrapped in blankets, still pale, but undeniably stronger. A bowl rests in his lap. He finishes the last of his supper while watching the fire. From time to time, his eyes drift toward the windows. You suspect he keeps checking that the walls remain around him. A person who nearly vanished into snow does not forget shelter quickly. The merchant notices. He says nothing. Instead, he tears off a piece of bread and places it beside Martin's bowl. The gesture is almost invisible, so naturally. Everyone notices. Martin thanks him. The merchant shrugs. You looked hungry, as no one believes that explanation, not even him. The hall grows quieter as the evening advances. Some brothers leave for their duties. Others return. The rhythm never stops entirely. You begin noticing details that escaped attention before. The worn edge of a bench polished smooth by countless hands. A repaired crack in the wall where mortar differs slightly in colour. Marks on the floor near the doorway where boots have scraped stone for generations. Small signs, tiny pieces of history hidden in plain sight. A monastery records its past in many ways, not only through books, sometimes through wear, sometimes through repairs, sometimes through things that survived. The old monk sits near one of the lamps trimming a wick. The task requires patience. Too short and the flame weakens. Too long and smoke fills the room. You watch his hands, steady, careful, unhurried. The same hands that helped rescue Martin now tend a lamp. The same hands that questioned travellers, checked stores, supervised repairs, and guided prayers. Life here does not separate important work from ordinary work. Everything belongs together. Across the room, a younger brother sweeps fresh rushes into a neat pile. The dry stalks whisper softly against the floor. The sound mixes with the fire, the breathing of sleepers, and the occasional crack of settling timber. The monastery has its own music, not performed, simply lived. Outside, the courtyard lies beneath untouched snow. The moon rises sometime during the evening. You discover this when curiosity pulls you toward the doorway once more. The air outside bites gently at your face. The storm has left the world transformed. Moonlight spreads across the courtyard like silver cloth. Every roof glows pale white. Every drift casts a shadow. The bell tower stands dark against the stars. For a moment, the monastery seems suspended between earth and sky. Silent, motionless, timeless. Then a shovel scrapes somewhere near the outer wall. Reality returns. A brother is clearing part of the path for tomorrow. Even beauty requires maintenance. You smile and step back inside. The warmth wraps around you again. The contrast feels almost magical. Cold moonlight behind, firelight ahead. Snow outside, bread inside. The dog has moved closer to the hearth. A sensible decision. Martin is speaking quietly with one of the pilgrims. You catch only fragments. Family, roads, letters, villages, ordinary subjects. Wonderful subjects. Danger often makes ordinary things precious. The merchant eventually falls asleep sitting upright against the wall. His pack remains beneath one arm. Some habits survive every circumstance. No one wakes him. The sight is too amusing. The old monk notices as well. A brief smile touches his face before disappearing. The lamp beside him glows steadily. Around it, shadows gather and retreat with every movement of the flame. You realize this may be your final full evening inside the monastery. The storm is ending. Roads will reopen. Travellers will continue their journeys. Life beyond the walls will return. Yet part of you already understands that leaving will feel strange. The monastery has become familiar, not comfortable exactly. The straw mattresses remain persuasive arguments against luxury. The corridors remain cold. The bells remain determined, yet familiarity has grown. You know the sounds now, the different footsteps, The kitchen door, the stable gate, the bell tower, the wind moving across the roof. The building no longer feels mysterious. It feels inhabited. A place gains warmth from people long before it gains warmth from fire. The evening grows later, one by one. Conversations fade. The pilgrims retire first, then Martin, several brothers disappear toward their sleeping quarters. The hall empties gradually, not abruptly, like a tide drawing away from shore. You remain near the fire a little longer. The flames are lower now, golden instead of bright orange. The logs glow from within. Heat rises gently across the room. The old monk extinguishes one lamp, then another. Darkness expands. The hall becomes softer, quieter, more distant. The sounds of the monastery retreat into the walls. A door closing, a footstep, a cough somewhere above, then silence, almost silence. The fire still breathes. The building still settles. The mountain still waits beyond the walls. Yet peace has replaced tension, not because danger no longer exists, because tonight nobody is facing it alone. Eventually you rise, the dormitory awaits, the familiar straw pallet, the scratchy blanket, the rafters overhead. You follow the corridor towards sleep. Behind you, the last lamp in the guest hall flickers softly. Ahead, darkness welcomes you, and outside, beneath moonlight and fresh snow, the mountain monastery rests at last after its long struggle with the storm. Morning arrives without announcing itself. No storm wakes you, no rattling shutters, no sudden gusts pushing against the roof. Instead, you open your eyes to stillness. For a few moments, you remain beneath the blanket, listening. The dormitory breathes softly around you. Someone shifts on a straw pallet. A board creaks overhead, far away. A bell rings through the monastery. The sound feels different today. Not urgent, not defiant, simply present. You sit up slowly. The familiar stiffness greets your shoulders and legs. The straw mattress has not improved overnight. The blanket remains scratchy. Medieval bedding has maintained its commitment to consistency. Yet even that feels comforting now. The room is brighter than it has been since your arrival. Pale light filters through the shutters. Not storm light. Morning light. Real morning light. The kind that reaches the mountains after difficult weather finally passes. The other travellers are waking as well. The pilgrims gather their belongings. The merchant checks his pack immediately. Martin sits upright near the wall, looking remarkably stronger than he did yesterday. His colour has returned. His eyes are clear. The mountain tried to keep him. The monastery disagreed. You dress and follow the others into the corridor. The building feels alive once more. Not because it was ever truly asleep, because daylight reveals movement differently. Brothers pass, carrying tools. A lay worker balances 2 buckets. Someone heads toward the kitchen with an armful of wood. The routine continues. It always continues. The scent of bread reaches you before you arrive at the hall. Of course it does. Some traditions deserve respect. Breakfast awaits. Warm porridge, fresh bread, hot drink. The meal feels almost celebratory despite its simplicity. Conversations drift through the room. Road conditions, snow depth, travel plans, repairs, the gate. Everyone wants news of the outside world. The old monk provides it calmly. The sky is clear. The wind has eased. Several paths remain blocked. Others may be open before midday. The lower road can likely be crossed with caution. The mountain is granting permission again. Temporary permission. That distinction matters. The merchant immediately begins calculating departure times. The pilgrims discuss routes. Martin studies the floor for a moment before speaking. He will remain one more day. No one argues. A wise decision. The old monk nods approvingly. Breakfast ends. Then comes the part you have been quietly anticipating. The courtyard. You step outside. The sight stops you completely. The monastery sits beneath a world transformed. Snow covers everything. Not messy snow, not storm snow. Finished snow, smooth, bright, untouched. The roofs gleam beneath sunlight. The walls cast sharp shadows. The bell tower rises into a sky so blue it almost seems impossible. Yesterday this place belonged to wind. Today it belongs to light. The mountains reveal themselves once more. Peak after peak stretches across the horizon. White ridges, dark forests, rock faces glittering beneath fresh snow. The scale is breathtaking. You understand now why people speak differently in places like this. The landscape demands it. Even the merchant falls silent. A remarkable achievement. Brothers work throughout the courtyard. Shovels move steadily. Paths are widened. Snow is pushed aside. The monastery is uncovering itself. You help where you can. A shovel is placed in your hands. Soon you are clearing part of the walkway between the guest hall and the kitchen. The work is satisfying. Simple. Push, lift, move, repeat. The snow squeaks beneath boots. Sunlight flashes from ice crystal. Cold air fills your lungs. Around you, life resumes. The stable doors open. Animals emerge briefly into the light. The merchant's mule appears deeply unimpressed by the entire experience. Some things never change. Martin joins the courtyard later, wrapped in a cloak. Several brothers greet him warmly, not dramatically, simply warmly, the sort of welcome reserved for someone who almost became a memory. He stands for a long moment looking toward the mountains, then back toward the monastery. No words, none are necessary. Near the bell tower, you notice grooves worn into a stone step. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of feet have passed there. Winter after winter, year after year, travellers, monks, workers, messengers, pilgrims. The step remembers all of them. The mountain remembers none. That thought stays with you. By midday, preparations for departure begin. Not yours alone. Everyone's. The pilgrims sort their packs. The merchant checks straps and buckles repeatedly. Martin's letters are dried and repacked. The monastery returns borrowed blankets, returns repaired items, returns travellers to the road. This may be one of its oldest tasks. Offering shelter is only half the work. Eventually people must continue. The old monk speaks with each traveller before departure. When your turn arrives, the conversation is brief. He asks where you intend to go. You tell him. He nods. Then he gives practical advice about the road ahead. Nothing mystical, nothing profound, just useful information, a fitting farewell. You thank him. The words feel inadequate. He seems unconcerned. Perhaps gratitude has many forms. A final bell sounds across the courtyard. The note drifts into the clear mountain air, not lonely, not distant, steady. The same bell that guided prayers, the same bell Martin followed through the storm, the same bell that marked the passing hours while snow buried the world beyond the walls. Now it rings beneath blue sky. The gate stands open. Sunlight spills across the road beyond. The drifts remain high. The journey ahead remains uncertain, yet the fear has gone. You take one last look around, the guest hall, the stable, the kitchen chimney, the covered walk, the bell tower, the snow-bright roofs, the people moving through their familiar tasks. Yesterday, this place was a refuge. Today, it is becoming a memory. A good memory, the kind carried quietly for years. You step toward the gate. The mountain waits beyond it. The road waits beyond it. Life waits beyond it. Behind you, the monastery continues exactly as it always has. The bells will ring, the fires will burn, and travellers will arrive, and storms will come, doors will open, ropes will be dried, and bread will be baked, and somewhere in the future, another weary traveller will see these same walls through falling snow and feel the same relief you felt. You pass through the gate. The snow crunches beneath your boots. Sunlight glitters across the mountains. The monastery remains behind you, small against the vastness of the Alps, yet somehow stronger for it. And as you begin walking down the newly opened road, the sound of the bell follows you for a little while longer before fading gently into the bright winter morning. The road curves gently away from the monastery. You continue walking for a while, your boots pressing fresh tracks into the snow. The air is cold but no longer harsh. Sunlight rests softly across the mountainside. Behind you, the bell tower grows smaller with every step. Soon the sounds of the monastery begin to fade. The scrape of shovels disappears, the murmur of voices vanishes, even the bell itself becomes distant. Only the mountains remain, and the quiet. You pause once upon a rise in the road and look back. The monastery sits peacefully among the snow. Smoke rises from its chimney in a thin grey ribbon. The walls that seemed so large during the storm now appear modest against the vast slopes surrounding them. Yet perhaps that is what makes them remarkable. Not their size, not their wealth, simply their persistence. Through winter after winter, they remain a place of firelight against darkness, a place of bread against hunger, a place of shelter against snow. You stand for a moment longer, letting the image settle into memory. Then you continue on. The road stretches ahead. The mountains watch silently. The sky shines clear above the peaks. Your breath drifts into the cold air and vanishes. Little by little, the monastery disappears behind a bend, yet it remains with you. The warmth of the hearth, the smell of bread, the scratching sound of quills in the scriptorium, the rustle of herbs hanging from rafters, the steady voices rising through the church in the dark hours before dawn, the rescue through falling snow, the rope drying beside the fire, the old monk trimming a lamp wick, the sleeping dog near the hearth. Small moments, quiet moments, the sort that rarely appear in grand histories, and yet they are often the moments that endure. As the afternoon light softens across the mountains, you allow those memories to drift gently through your mind, no urgency, no destination that must be reached immediately, only the peaceful rhythm of footsteps on snow. The Alps grow quieter, the road grows quieter. Even your thoughts begin to settle, far behind you, hidden now beyond ridges and trees. The monastery continues its day. The bells will ring again, the fire will be tended, the doors will open, travellers will arrive, others will leave. Winter will come and go, years will pass, generations will pass. Yet somewhere high among these mountains, that small community of stone, wood, prayer, work and kindness will continue meeting the seasons one day at a time. And now, as the sun lowers gently over the snowy peaks, you can let the image grow softer, the walls becoming smaller, the bell becoming fainter, the road becoming quieter, the mountain air becoming still. Allow the scene to drift like falling snow, slowly, gently, peacefully, and if sleep is already finding you, let it come. Let the firelight fade. Let the bells grow distant. Let the monastery rest beneath its blanket of snow. Let the mountain stand watch beneath the stars. And let yourself follow the quiet road onward into the calm winter evening. Sweet dreams.